Hello and welcome to RPGs Uncovered. This is the last episode of Season 5. We are here for our final review and analysis of Locus by Cobblepath Games. And I'm really excited for this discussion. I have a lot of fun with these review and analysis final episodes. It's kind of it's part review, part like behind the scenes commentary, part like extended after show, and it's just a lot of fun to hang out and talk with the amazing cast, talk with people in chat. So if you have any questions about the game or the show we ran, or tips, tricks, player side, GM side stuff, just hang out in the chat, say hello, ask your questions, and we'll see what we can answer. But primarily, we are here to talk about how we felt this game worked for us, and help give a little bit more insight as to what sort of players, what sort of GMs, what sort of tables will work best for Locus. So that is the aim for today. These are very free-form kind of shows, these final review and analysis episodes. So we could go for an hour and a half, we could go for our full 4 hours. So we'll just see what it is we wind up talking about. But before we get started on the actual review and analysis discussion, I don't have too much to announce on my end. I am working away on Season 6 of RPGs Uncovered. I am hoping to get that sorted out, as soon as possible, but that stuff takes time, and unfortunately, due to some confusion on a lot of people's ends, including my own, things got quite delayed in getting that planned. But we are moving forward, so stay tuned for more information on that, and come hang out on Twitter and on our Discord. You can find both links down below. Come hang out, and we'll be announcing casting for that soon. So if you want to get in on RPGs Uncovered, come hang out. I've had people on that have zero streaming experience before. You just need to have a good camera and a microphone. That's all I ask for, and we will, we'll help you teach. We'll help you get into a new game. Anyway, yeah, stay tuned for more announcements on that. Hopefully, I will have more details soon. Other than that, just go check out previous content on YouTube, because I'd really like to get that site up with more viewers, more views of the tutorials and the AP shows and whatnot, because they made that a lot easier for us content creators who actually use that platform for something useful. So hopefully we'll make it there in a little bit. I think that's all I have. I'm ready to get talking about Locus and how that worked out. So let's introduce, not players this time anymore. I guess just I don't know, roundtable guests, I suppose. The amazing cast of Iron Coke and
Friends.
Conscience, as always. Yeah, Kat, hello, welcome.
What? Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, it's me. I'm here. I didn't. I
Yeah.
lived. I lived and survived. I'm not coming to you streaming by candlelight.
Week by week, sometimes that's all we can ask for.
Listen, I'll do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we have to do this by candlelight, I'm down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say that's an aesthetic.
Yeah, yeah. Get a me and Gavin from Witches of Midnight might have to have a talk about this, because that sounds like it would work.
Ooh. Yeah.
Sounds like an idea. Speaking of which, Lion, hello.
Hi. I'm Lion. I am the creative director and founder for Tales from the Table Studios. Very excited to talk about Locus. You can find me at the Lion Knight 42 on Twitter, or at TFTT Studios on Twitter, or Tales from the Table Studios anywhere else, because the name is too long for Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Real excited for this. Also, while we're here, fuck the Supreme Court. Just saying.
Yeah, fuck them.
Yeah.
That's just a part of all my intros and outros now.
Yeah,
Fuck it.
yeah. I mean, you,
Also,
you could pretty much make that a permanent
yeah.
permanent shout out
It's
there,
just
unfortunately.
a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, JD, rounding out our cast here.
Hi, I'm JD. Lion already took some of the words out of my mouth, so I can just introduce myself and stick with that. I am a storyteller and player with Live from the Apocalypse, and you can find me on social media at JD, not Jason Dean, on pretty much all social media platforms.
All right, excellent. Yes, do go follow these three amazing people. They do great stuff. Actually, I've been forgetting about this. That's not what I need.
In the meantime, I will say there's no such thing as too many times to have said "fuck the Supreme Court." I'm just saying.
Yeah, until somebody, preferably them, listens. But
Would that we could be so lucky, but
yeah,
yeah. I'm sorry.
that
I'm sorry. I don't mean to
as
derail us.
much as I support that sentiment, that is not what we are here to discuss. But
Fair.
RPGs Uncovered does stand with that. But we are here to discuss Locus, and I would like to get right into the actual review and analysis. We had a great season, a great show this season. The finale was completely unhinged. It was amazing. I believe the review we got from our from the Locus creators was I quote, "Blimey." That's it. And I stand by that. That's about what my reaction was while it was happening. So let's we will hold off on the I guess sort of extended after show sort of portion of this for a little bit later. We'll interject plenty of little anecdotes and questions and answers and whatnot related back to the show. But in case you are here just to learn about what Locus is and if it works for you, let's get started with the actual review and analysis. And if you do think Locus is for you, you can go back to the very first episode of this season for the entire rule set, rules, tools, and themes explained. Everything you need to know to play Locus. The first episode for this season, and we do have the first basic mechanics tutorial up on our YouTube. That is complete. I think it clocked in just under or just over 5 minutes. I think it was just over 5 minutes because I couldn't make it a short somewhere. I don't remember. But little bite-sized, and those basic mechanics ones are usually the longest. And then from there, I do have at least 2 or 3 more planned. 2 that are almost ready to go out, but they're almost always ready to go out. So stay tuned for the tutorial for stress and willpower and all of that stuff, and for combat. And during the break, I plan on going back to some of the previous seasons and either redoing or finishing some of the tutorials there that I did not get to. But let's talk about some Locus final review and analysis. So, obviously, I had a great time running this, especially towards the end. If you were following for the entire season, you might have noticed I was a little off my game the first few episodes. That was on me and not my life. That was on me and my life, and not anything to do with the game at all. I think it is a fantastic game. It's a very creative game, very unique system and way of looking at things, and we discussed this in our that first episode, the Learning the Game episode, with the rules, tools, and themes, specifically the themes. So if we want to run through those once again, just bullet point. We don't need to go into the full explanation of them. But I think we pretty much covered all of the major aspects of what a Locus game is, and first and foremost, what it says on the tin. It's a personal horror mystery TTRPG, and I think we did a really good job of portraying that. And on top of just that genre, or I should say, with that genre, it can be plugged into pretty much any setting, any other genre that you want to work with. So we went with something more modern. It could easily be plugged into, say, sci-fi is another go-to. I have some interesting ideas on how I would use this on like a space station, almost alien style. I think could be really fun. So personal psychological horror mystery. Let me throw this back to my cast, because that was mainly on you guys. How did you feel about the personal horror and mystery side of this game?
Hmm.
So I'll jump in here. I thought it was great. I think that the game did a really good job of providing just enough of a framework and the tools through the card system. That's something I really do want to focus on when we talk today and as we go through this episode. Is that how useful and how important the cards were to helping provide an idea for where your character is at any given time, mentally, emotionally. I think it, mixed with like willpower, did a really good job of providing those frameworks without it being this overbearing thing. Because one of the things that I see a lot of the time, and one of my personal feelings is always, don't generally tell in horror, don't tell your players how they feel, right? And like there are exceptions to it, but I feel like for the most part, don't tell your players how they feel. Let them feel that way and let them figure out how their characters feel. And I think this does such a good job of implementing that conceptually. It makes it so that you never do have to like give that direction or lead too much, because there's always this thing you as the player can reference and go, I understand, at least in an abstract way, where I am and where my character's head is at and why it's there. And I really, really like that. I'd even want to say, I think it could be really interesting to dive deeper on it and take all of the cards as what they represent and use those to kind of frame a little bit more of the mindset of the characters as they go. I don't feel like I was personally in a position with Chad to really do that, and I don't think it's something you have to like enforce mechanically, but I am curious to see how interesting that would be to take this wonderful mechanic and go, what if we dig a little deeper with it and be like, okay, all of these represent their respective vices or respective virtues. And so as we go, these are the things that the characters are taking into account and and keeping in mind, and what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. But I thought it was great. I thought it did a really good job of providing us the direction we needed to lean into and know when to double down or shift from our own personal like horror stories that we're going here and our collective stories.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. From a mechanical standpoint, there's a lot of really useful tools in Locus to help prompt players to, as you said, figure out how their own characters are feeling and how to portray them. Because I agree with you. I don't think a GM should, in most cases, tell you, "Hey, Chad, you are angry right now." You should prompt them to be angry through the story, through the experiences that you're going through, by poking them with a sharp stick and then tossing it over to Roman. But a GM shouldn't necessarily frequently have to explicitly say how somebody else is feeling, because that is, again, a level of infringing on agency, I suppose, because your ability to take action is just as important as one's ability to understand and express themselves, and their character is really important. So I like that this game does have a lot of different tools. The card system being the foremost that Lion was talking about. That really does help shape how where they are in the Malice Locus. I like that I like from the GM standpoint and from the player standpoint that it accomplished two really important goals for each of us. One is what Lion, you were just saying, where it informs the character as to how much the situation is weighing down on them. And on the GM side of things, it lets me know where each of them are in the sort of cake layers of negativity that is the Malice Locus. So for a while there, I don't know how much you guys picked up, but for a while there, JD was operating on a level or two underneath you other two guys.
Yeah.
So I was able to play around with that, introduce different elements that only Roman noticed, or elements that Roman did not notice because they were higher up. And I was even I'm not sure if this is exactly what you were meaning, Lion, but I know when I was handing out different cards as they came up, I would point out if they were vice cards or neutral cards or haunt cards. In order to, like, if you drew a haunt card, I would, this is your haunt. You are things are weighing a bit more down on you, or hey,
Yeah.
you got a vice. So this situation, it's daunting, but it's not as bad. You find some way to resolve yourself, and I usually bounce that back to you guys to tell how that worked.
Yeah, that's like half of what I'm saying. The other
Mm-hmm.
half of what I was suggesting is looking at the neutral cards and going, well, what are the vices and virtues
Yeah.
associated with these? And how would my character perceive those with it not being their primary vice or virtue?
Mm-hmm.
How would that impact them in the moment? And how would that be represented as these secondary or tertiary things about them as the game goes on?
Yeah, and I think that would be a really interesting addition or expansion to the rules. Let's see. On top of the card system, that worked really well with this. Yeah, just figuring out how I want to structure this review, but really we're just having a conversation, so I'll just flow with it. So keeping on the sort of mechanics side of things with how it relates to your characters and how they understand themselves and their surroundings and then act upon it, I'd say the next big thing would be stress and willpower, which Lion you also included in there a little bit. I think the stress and willpower system in this game is a very interesting one. I wonder if I structured how I presented the game, the story to you guys, if it would have seemed a little bit more stressful. I want to bounce this back to you guys to see how stressful it actually was for you and your characters, and how how much you were really worried about the stress mechanic, because I noticed you guys were flush with willpower pretty much all the way up until the end, and we had very few failed rolls. Especially after willpower was applied, because you guys always seem to have willpower. So it was very easy for you guys to not fail rolls, which means you weren't having to make stress tests. So I would have to basically induce a stressful situation to you guys in order to force you to make stress tests, and then you use willpower to make sure you pass your stress tests. So I don't think anybody but Chad really increased in stress, if I remember correctly. You did at the end, yes. But we only kind of bounced back and forth.
Relatively early. I know, because but again, that was a situation where I, as a player, went, this makes sense. I won't spend willpower here. I will say that I think there are two things that can be taken away from that. Because it absolutely, and it was something I wanted to talk about today, was it felt like we were just so built up on willpower. Some of that was luck, because the first like two card draws for most of us were virtues, so we came in with a lot of willpower. But I think that it creates this weird complication, especially for this as a streaming game, where you really want to create a good narrative, you really want to do that slow burn, because realistically, outside of the like high pace, high tension, like slasher horror stuff, that slow burn's really important. But it does create that problem of, well, how can I provide all of these opportunities to burn their willpower, so when we get to that end point where everything is a nightmare, they don't have it all. And it gets kind of hard. And I think that in that particular aspect, this game is maybe better suited as a home game than a streaming game, because you can push a lot harder in those moments. You can find those bits at the beginning to kind of nitpick at and push stress on players that might feel a little like jarry for people watching, even if it wouldn't for the players, because there really is a difference in like being audience and being like a player at a table. And that's one thing that did stand out to me, is I think that's one thing worth considering, is you either have to be really careful about the game you present or the narrative you present, and be ready to have ways to just rip away at that willpower early if you need to, without kicking things into full force. But because you don't want that situation at the end. The other side of that coin, and I promise I'll keep it short because I know I'm talking a bunch. The other side of that coin, I feel like, though, is something that I always say, right? Is trust your players, right? There were definitely times where all of us throughout the course of the series were like, this makes sense.
Mhm.
We're going to take this failure because, yeah, I have 8, 12, 13, 15, whatever willpower, but this is way better and we're going to do that. And I think that's the other side of that coin, right? Is trust your players, trust that you're all here telling this story together and you want that horror experience. But if you are playing a game that is more directed at internalizing those feelings of horror and that stressful situation, and that's what you're looking for, then I think that it's important to note the things that I already went over about needing to have that extra tension at the beginning and find those stressful situations to keep willpower at a relatively low level, so as a currency it always feels strained.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was just reflecting on that because I was thinking back to those like early stress tests and the fact that there were a few that I chose to let Roman fail. And in those moments, it was because it narratively felt like it made sense. You know, there wasn't a high enough stake yet that it felt important that that stress remain low. But it is that interesting tension of how do you then build up to those horrifying moments and have already whittled things down. I think, though, on the flip side, not to go into how things unfolded, but, you know, there was plenty else going on that did not require our willpower to be depleted by the time we got to the finale.
Yes. Yes. Well, that was kind of planned, because I saw that the game. Yeah, there's a lot of surprisingly intricate moving parts to the GM side of things for this game, at least for the way I ran it. And I think, not to diverge from what we were talking about, I think if I were to go back and do Locus again, I would probably do it as a shorter series, either a one shot or like a 2-shot, maybe 3-shot sort of game. I think it did work for what we were doing here. I think this was a good representation. I think this was a good demo play, and I think it told a great story, mainly thanks to you wonderful people. But I think from a mechanical standpoint, I think it would be better suited for a much smaller, a much smaller story in a much more confined setting.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just to mirror back to what you were saying about keeping it more fast-paced, more not necessarily slasher horror, but definitely more like a self-contained movie, where there is always something happening. The group is always running from one place to the next. The monster's creeping down the hallway. You're hiding behind the wall of chainsaws. Whatever it may be, there's always something going on that is a stressor, an environmental or monster-induced stressor on the party. And the way I went about doing this, because I saw all of the way that personal feelings, especially personal negativity, whether it be grief or remorse, or the vices, temptation, malice, discord, all of that stuff. I really wanted to focus more on the characters and their relationships with each other and themselves and their growth, and how all of those feelings were a direct cause of the manifestations of the monsters that they would come up against. I wanted to really showcase the development of those characters, and I've never been a huge horror fan as far as movies are concerned. Most of my horror has been sci-fi horror. But they don't generally have as much character development as other genres, because one, most of those characters usually die, and two, they don't usually have the time or need for too much backstory or character development because they're always running from the monster. Or they're always trying to escape. Who they are and what they did last week usually doesn't matter when there's a guy with a chainsaw running after you or whatever it may be. So I think I focused with Iron Coke and Conscience a little too much on the character side of things and the fact that this was an entertainment-based show instead of, as Lion, you said, a home game specifically for the horror aspect. I think that did get away from me and caused me to diverge a bit more than... It caused me to diverge a bit from the rules, or how it was intended.
I do think that this, and again, since we have come kind of full circle on that kind of the conversation, I'm just going to put this little capstone on it because I feel like this is a really good thing to point out. Is I think that's exactly why this game functions better as a home played game versus a stream game, because so many of the conversations can be had between the players without having to play all of that out for an audience. Right. Mm-hmm. The ability to I'm a very, anyone who knows me knows I'm a very big believer in those like between session conversations between players as players to find those moments that you want to have or to go over moments that happened before now. And I think Locus really benefits from that. I think the ability to, when you sit down to play, know what happened before and know who you are to each other or who you aren't to each other is really, really important, because then you don't have to spend as much time settling in. You do get that kind of like momentum that is constantly pushing forward. And I think that that's super important to make that distinction for games. I think Locus is a really good example of that, where when you sit down and are telling your story and are rolling your dice, the game wants you to do those things. It wants to eat your willpower. It wants you to be in high tense, high pressure, high stress situations. Like you said, it's like a lot of horror films. So I do like horror. I'm a big fan of horror of all kinds. And like atmospheric horror and like personal psychological horror are some of my favorite horror stories. And what it does, what so often they do is they present your character. They find easy ways to present you with the struggles they are having. And then the whole rest of it is either torturing the characters in ways that either are mundane or aren't mundane throughout, or torturing the viewer by creating that atmosphere and then doing nothing with it, and then doing nothing with it, and then doing nothing with it, and making you really emotionally invest and wait for it and want it. And then when it happens, you're miserable because everything has gone to shit. But in doing so, you do create these opportunities as a character to have these stresses rise and rise and rise. And I think it's a struggle to kind of translate that on stream with a game like this because of the way the mechanics are laid
out. But that is not to say that the mechanics don't work. They absolutely work for what they are amazing. It just, I think no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, please don't take away from what I'm saying that the mechanics are bad. I love the way this game lays out its gameplay, and I love the mechanics it uses.
Yes. So I think my takeaway for this would be, if you're looking to play a game of Locus, I think it would probably benefit you to start off with like a one-shot or something much more smaller and contained, and then expand from there if you think that makes sense. That's what I would go with. I don't know if anybody disagrees with that. Because I did really like how this played, and I did really like the slow burn, especially once things did get going. When we get to the actual discussion of the show itself, excuse me, I'll have words on that as well. But I think it was a good representation of the game. The only thing on top of that would be that I very much did encourage these three to create characters and to play those characters in a way that would develop confrontationally with each other. So we didn't get to see a lot of the ways that characters can work together to help themselves and each other grow with calming down from stress and with discarding cards. It did come up a few times. There were good instances of when a character would, either do something internally as themselves that went against their vice, or worked with the group to demonstrate their virtue. That did come up a couple times, but it was somehow at the same time largely unnecessary, and at the same time not facilitated by how I was, as I've been saying, poking you guys with sticks and then throwing the sticks over to one of the other guys. How did you guys feel about that? Kat, JD, me and Lion are talking too much.
I'll hand the floor over to you, Kat.
Oh? Don't hand the floor to me. I don't know what to do with it. I actually had the different reaction from Lion, where instead of playing with a shorter, more condensed one, I would want to draw this out. I would play this in a much longer form, because I think a lot of the mechanics are about kind of decaying and fraying over a long period of time. And I think that in a much longer format, you can really kind of savor that. And give, like, the individual, like, the rising and falling of stress is, I think, something that you could make more use of over a longer term.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. Yeah, I've talked way too much.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think, what it really also depends on is what type of story you're telling. I mean, this is psychological horror in essence, and as Kat was saying, that rising and falling of tension, and you had said this too, Lion, like, that's central to that idea. It's that sense of, like, when is it going to happen? When are things going to get bad? When are all of these little hints we've been getting going to pay off? And how bad is it going to be? And so having that longer space is very different. I think there's, having not played in but watched like one shots of Locus, I think it can be a really powerful experience, but there isn't that fraying and decaying. There is just like, we are, here in a haunted house, things are after us, things are bad, we've got to figure it out, we've got to survive the night, basically.
Yeah.
And that's
And
that's not very psychological. Like, there can be elements, but you can't really dig into what are your personal horrors that are now being activated when it is just that, like, absolute, we're going full speed.
Yeah, this is a good game for suddenly you're all fucked, but I think it is a better game for a longer, more developed you're all fucked. I think Locus can do either. I just think it would be better in long format.
Now it's interesting, you two talking much more from, in my mind, the narrative side of things, with it being based on the mechanics, facilitating this, but the game being based on thematically, as you said, the sentiment of decay, the fact that you can't really recover from wounds all that well, the constant fraying of your stress, and the constant accumulation of the cards in your hand, and on top of all of the interpersonal, inter-party stuff that may go on from a roleplay standpoint. And I very much agree when we're talking about when we're looking at the game through that lens. But then my GM side of the brain switches over to the mechanics lens, and I do have to question that. So there is this strange sort of dichotomy in Locus where the rules really can do both very well, but you're going to use those rules and tools differently for whichever way you're trying to play, and you're going to get a different sort of game out of it. So I think it's really interesting that you can do both. So if you want one or the other, you can have one or the other with this one rule set. But it can be hard at least I found it difficult to find and straddle that line between the two, which I think what I was trying to go for. So I think doing this again, either a much shorter format for everything's immediately gone to shit, you guys need to survive, get out of here now, full stress,
Yeah.
full stress, full stress, full stress, get out, or extend it even further to see, you know, how far you can push those characters before they break. Because I don't think anyone, once we got to the finale, was really necessarily at that breaking point just yet. Most of you guys had plenty of boxes on your death's door left.
Yeah, like mechanically, you mean, right?
Mechanically, is what I
Yeah,
mean. Yeah,
yeah.
plenty of death's door left. Only a few major injuries, if that, and if we had more time, you guys could have treated those major injuries down to minor injuries once again. Um, and as I said, most of you guys were at baseline stress or just the one up from it. Baseline being easy. Lion and Cat, and you both eventually progressed to tense. So it would be interesting if we drew that out even more
Yeah.
to really grind the characters down. So I think that's the difference in the gameplay that you would get. In a one shot, you're going to have to throw so much at the players to
Mhm.
get them ground down. You're going to have to force those skill checks all the time so that they are constantly worrying about failure. They're constantly having to do stress tests. You're constantly throwing them in stressful situation after stressful situation. In order to get that mechanic side ground down, but you're not going to get as much from the narrative interpersonal side,
Yeah.
just by having such a smaller game. But then the opposite can also be a problem. You're going to get a much more nuanced, long format role play out of it, but the mechanics are going to the mechanics are going to have just as much, if not more, of a slow burn working
Yeah.
towards that breaking point.
I think though that this series is a good example of why that can work. I will say that because we did see that as like, as JD's cards accumulated
Mm-hmm.
specifically, you did see that how much weight that would. And if we had another 3, 4, 5 episodes, I think it would have been really interesting to watch as inevitably it just you can't fight it after a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
You will burn that willpower. It will get worse because you will take injuries. It will just keep getting harder to survive. And I definitely do echo that. What I would want to say is I do think both versions of this work really well. And again, part of it does come down to if you want to lean really hard into the mechanical aspects of the game or really hard into the narrative aspects of the game. But they both complement each other really
Yes.
well. And one thing that I think is really worth noting, it's another thing that I say a lot online, and I know there's some discourse going on that is adjacent to this. So great, we're relevant. But TTRPGs, for me, one of the hallmarks of a good TTRPG is a game that knows what it wants to do, presents what it wants to do, and then does that specific thing really well, right? And I will almost as a whole point out PBTA as like a system of building games that does this a lot of the time, where it goes, this is the kind of story we're here to tell. Here are the rules and suggestions, then concepts that facilitate that specific kind of story and gameplay. And I think Locus nails that. And I think this is really good evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can be like, yeah, we can lean super heavy mechanically, play a one-shot game or a two-shot game, and have it be just exactly what it's trying to do. Or we can play a 15 session, whatever it may be, season long game and have it really, really be an interesting delving to the intricacies of both how the mechanics work and how the narrative is presented. And both succeed at almost the same thing as far as what Locus wants to do as a game. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's awesome.
And I just want to say, like, I've been reflecting this time because I think I'm the only player who has played Locus previously. And as we've been talking about this, I've been thinking through how that experience was in comparison to this one. And Something that I'm just like really impressed by, Jack, is like what you're having to juggle as the GM of this and the ways you implement these different things. Because the way we escalated in that game was by the end of the first session, all of us had taken a grievous injury.
Mm.
So we are one session into a series of 4, and all of us had marked off one full death's door.
Oh, wow.
But the way that setting was structured is essentially if we were in the Matrix, we didn't feel any pain, so we could ignore those injuries and those penalties. But
Interesting.
anytime we stepped out of it, we would have all of those injuries accumulate and continue to build.
That's so cool.
So I was just kind of reflecting on the different ways you can create that sense of tension and fear and stress, and injuries being one of them, but how you have to then balance that with the intended length of gameplay. Because if you start giving people horrific injuries and there isn't anything that erases it, or gives them a reprieve, well, now you have a character who is steadily becoming like unplayable.
Right.
And that being then, how do you balance the cards, the injuries, the stress, the willpower, and all of those dynamics that can begin to start to create that heaviness and that weight over the characters and put them in those sorts of not impossible, but starting to feel impossible to escape situations that is so central to the horror genre.
So that sounds like a fascinating idea. I wanna watch that, because that sounds like a fun idea. I love anything even reminiscent of the Matrix. But that's very interesting. I might have to pick your brain about that, because I think that's a good segue to the next topic of combat in Locus, which I think is, I can't speak for the creators, but from what I took from reading the rules, that combat isn't really intended to, or conflict isn't really intended to be combat like it is in the D&D's game. I'm very interested in how all of the characters, JD, you said, having taken a grievous injury, because it's quite, as we've seen, or at least as I saw in Iron Coke and Conscience, it's very difficult to actually injure you guys. By the rules, if you take damage outside of combat, it's always going to be a minor injury. So I kind of had to. There was that time when Laura was trapped in the coke storage, and I snuck a major injury onto her by calling it a monster attack. It was a monster attack, but we were not technically in combat, so it really should have been a minor injury. But even in combat, with all the dice everybody rolls, and the fact that you need, I think it's 3 or 4 net successes to get a grievous injury, I was having trouble actually dealing you guys damage.
I mean, I was going to say Chad helped with that.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think people would have gotten hurt a little bit faster if it wasn't for Chad.
I was going to say Chad helped on both sides. Chad helped in adding the damage and also taking it away.
Yeah, I think that the conflict stuff is something I would want to spend more time with, right? Because we only got to do so much of it. But I will say that it did feel, with no knowledge of the GM side of things, right? Because I haven't looked at the GM's book, and I don't know anything about, I've only seen the player facing information. It did always feel like we were in trouble. Whether that is mechanically true or not, but it did always feel that way. It did always feel stressful. We also did, again, go a little bit, I have to double back to this. We did have a lot of willpower to spend on making sure we didn't get our faces smashed in.
Right.
And that did happen. A noticeable amount, in my opinion. I think it was definitely something where, had we not had as much willpower as we did, we probably would have gotten more of those injuries earlier. The other thing that, so for me, as someone who has spent so much time with the D and the other D, and then the finding of paths and things of that nature, including the concept of initiative in your games when it comes to these conflict moments, it can be really hard to separate that from the idea of combat. And as someone who has over the last year just become so taken with, I'm going to say it again, Powered by the Apocalypse, and the idea of narrative conflicts and narrative combats and not having those initiatives, that's something that I think would have been really beneficial here for even just setting the tone, right? Of like, well, once we're in initiative, it feels like we're fighting, like just because of the history of TTRPGs.
When you say roll for initiative, it's almost like starting a little mini game. Like your characters move from the map, the screen wiggles, and you got your 3 people moving like this on one side, and you got those 3 people moving like this on the other side. It's a completely different part of the game.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. And because Locus does do that too, right? When you roll initiative in Locus, you are now playing a mini game. You roll initiative, and now combat doesn't work the same way, or conflict doesn't work the same way as just doing your checks does most of the time, right? It is these, I roll this, you roll this, and now we compare our dice, which is different from how you resolve most checks in Locus. So it, for me, it was a little bit like, well, you don't want us to fight, which is good because you shouldn't want us to fight in this game. But it almost feels like you do want to fight in this game, which is the one thing that I will point out as like something maybe that is not my favorite, is that issue of, well, conflict. I'm going to use that term very specifically here. Conflict should be terrifying. And conflict should feel like, in a game like this, like we can't win, right? We shouldn't be able to beat these guys. Maybe we beat one. We beat the first scary we come across. We get really lucky. But even for us in our playthrough, we didn't beat them.
No.
We outsmarted them and survived. And that's the difference. And I feel like it gets a little muddled sometimes with how it's presented. But that could, on the other side of the coin, and I promise I'll shut up after this, that could arguably be a way to lean towards pushing those injuries on players more, because there is that, like, you have to learn to run away.
That is something I. Sorry, JD. No, you go.
I feel like that also maybe was added to in this situation with some of the characters, because like I'm thinking about a group of characters, and I know the monsters are designed to be unbeatable. We're not meant to beat them regardless of strength and physical prowess and all of that. And I also think with Laura and Chad being who they were, like Laura always being ready to throw down, Chad being, a bodybuilder, that there was kind of that vibe immediately brought in. Whereas I could imagine if there were 3 characters who, like Roman, were not like going to be thrown down at all, it would have been very different in terms of character reactions. And there would have probably been more leaning into the like, okay, this is one of those situations where we're having to like run and hide and get away and figure out the path where we don't encounter this thing at all. And I think like something that stands out to me that again is such a hard balance is there were moments where I almost wished we could have been more consistently separated, because that would have really pushed that, like, I can't fight this, by myself, even if my friend could, like, I need to get as far away from this thing as is possible. But then you're having to like spotlight different people in different places and all of that, and that becomes a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that.
I would also like to tack on to that very quickly. I know I said I'd shut up. So very quickly, I just want to tack on. I think that Locus also rewards you for not min-maxing in regards to like the story and the experience, right? Because like you said, part of what made it the experience it was for us was Chad and Laura were both very physically capable people. And it's not like we sat down and went, well, let's break this system. It was just the characters as they were designed conceptually, and then like for me at least, I can say I didn't even look at the like mechanics immediately before coming up with the concept, and then looked at it and went, oh, okay, so I know how to put this together because I know what Chad would be like. But I think that the game is a lot more rewarding if you can still do that, obviously, and it's a lot of fun. But I do think that that's a really good point to make of think about how your stats, which I want to talk more about later because I love the stats in this game, but think about how your stats will detail how you interact with the things around you. I think that's really important for Locus.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let's see. You knocked me off my path there, Lion.
I'm
But
sorry.
no, that's good. Uh, yeah, I think no, that's what I was going to say. It was the first episode, I believe, when I tried to attack you with a pack of dogs, and Laura was like, "No." And I was like, and I think correctly identified at that point that you guys were not going to approach conflict in Locus exactly the way it was intended to in the game, which is fine. It just makes for a different play experience that I think JD you said a lot of good words about, because I think I don't have to just think. I know from the director's guide of this, the intention is that the character should really not be should not be able to take the monsters, in a straight up fight, let alone scare them off. So I probably should have, wiggled that more into, some way to actually get the monsters engaged in chasing you. Because it is the intent of Locus that you guys deal with conflict by running and or hiding, primarily. And then if you can outsmart them, if you can trap them somewhere, if you can like throw them down a pit, whatever it may be, if you can take care of them, but you have to do it in non-direct ways. I think with everything I was going on in my personal life in the first two episodes, and then you guys kind of threw me off with how just direct and playing against the grain you guys were going. I think I could have handled the first two episodes a little bit better to have forced more of that sort of overbearingness on you guys. I was more focused in the existential dread and in the formulation of all of those interpersonal problems. That when the dogs were chased off, I'd kind of just let them run off and refocused onto something else. And I think if I were to do that again, I would have found some way to uh, really have. I mean, I kind of did. I had them chase you. I had you circle around the house, but time after time, you guys were pretty good at laying down precautions or making other sorts of rolls that kind of deterred against that. And I
Well,
think
it's
that's
difficult because it's the first time that we, as the characters, are
Mhm.
interacting with these things. So it's a bunch of angry dogs. Fuck those dogs.
Right.
It's fine. We're not gonna be afraid of a couple. And even if like Laura had been like "fuck off" and the dogs had been like "no," I mean, our reaction more likely than not, unless they're like face split open, is probably still gonna be "wow, those are some rowdy asshole dogs." Which I think is important to take into account too. So I would put that
I don't
out
know.
there. I think that's
I don't know if you guys have have been ganged up on by half a dozen rabid dogs before.
that's fair.
We're not
Fair.
talking the poodle
Yeah.
down the street that's barking at you from
Sure.
behind the fence. No, I've
I
I've
did once get
met
chased like
roaming
4
dogs.
blocks by a big angry rabid dog
Mm.
when I was a kid. That was an experience.
But regardless, no shade towards you
Yeah.
guys for how you reacted or the game at all for my difficulties in presenting that. I think that was just you do have to refocus how you GM a game like this as opposed to a game like D&D. If you are so used to playing
Mhm.
both of those Ds, you're going to have to refocus your mind quite a bit
Oh yeah.
to get away from direct combat, one side versus the other side combat, um And I think one of the things I don't usually call it a struggle, but I think it is a struggle in this particular game is that I don't like telling players no. I'm a big fan of yes and, or
Mm-hmm.
at the very least no but. But I think there were a number of times in this game when I think you guys were attempting and very capable at succeeding at doing something that the game didn't really work with, like scaring the dogs away, or like some of the combat maneuvers you guys wanted to do at the end. Little things here and there that didn't present a big enough problem to really warrant stopping and having conversation, or
Mm-hmm.
redefining things, or forcing me to tell you guys no. There were just a bunch of little things that I think added up to taking this game in a different direction than I think uh, the brush strokes would have presented.
I will take this opportunity one more time to poke at the combat system a little bit and be like, I think that problem would be solved a lot if the conflict system was narrative versus having a hard initiative.
Mm,
I think,
mm,
like, especially with the stuff we were trying to do, right? I think it would have been a lot easier to not fall outside of the lines, for lack of a better term.
mm.
If it had been a little more open narratively versus the like defined initiative.
I, and and I may be wrong on the mechanics, so Jack, let me know if I am. But I think when I'm hearing Lion talk about that narrative piece, part of what is coming to my mind that feels so different in Powered by the Apocalypse is that, like, in D&D, everyone is very like stationary, and
Mm-hmm.
in Powered by the Apocalypse it's always about like giving and receiving harm. And
Mm.
so I think that
Yep.
piece of, like, if you choose to act in some way against the monster is going to be able to immediately act against you,
Right.
brings in a very
Exactly.
different level of threat.
Right. Yeah. So instead of, one side acting and that is resolved separately, and then the other side acting and that is resolved separately, games like Piba does, or there are plenty of other games out there that do it. If
Yeah.
if one side is usually the only action taking side, but by taking action they invite action against them, is
Yeah.
is generally the way I perceive it. Um, I think that system really works well for what it does, and I think there could be an argument for that being made, for it working better in a sort of genre piece like this. I don't think the combat system in this game is bad by any means. I think it approaches combat in a very interesting way, and again I have to remind myself not to call it combat but to call it conflict.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it does approach conflict in a very interesting way. I do like the contested check sort of situation. It's a nice divergence from, having a difficulty value that you have to meet. I like that it, pits one entity's functionality over another entity's functionality. Uh, but it can, kind of drop into a mini game sort of thing, which, as we've said, gets the players thinking that this is a combat game, and it really is not a combat game. So
Yeah.
that's another good takeaway for Locus. If you enjoy combat games, this one isn't really going to be for you. And if you do play it that way, it's going to either be really devastating if the GM really decides to punish you, or not at all, if you play it sort of the way that the mechanics work despite the thematic intent. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it because there's a lot of nuance to it. I like that you can only attack when you have dedicated weapons to attack with. Just punching something isn't going to work. I really like the injury system. The fact that
Oh yeah.
you can take a certain amount of death's door and have to deal with injuries, I think is really good. There are systems like Forge in the Dark in which multiple injuries stack. But in those systems, there are also more ways to bring those back down again. But what I really like with this, as I believe, Kat, you were saying, is that constant working towards fraying, towards the decline, the decay of the character. So having those injuries not stack but be more difficult to deal with and more detrimental, I think, is a really interesting way to take combat, and to take combat outside of just that conflict. So once you do get through whatever conflict it is, you have to deal with those injuries for the rest of the game, is something I really enjoyed about the conflict system here.
Hmm. Mm. In a lot of games, I would consider it an okay thing for combat to feel like it takes place in a different system than the rest of the game. Because I'm a JRPG fan, I can forgive that. That's not a big deal for me. I don't know that that choice suited Locus, but it's not inherently a bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that having a hard line, and whenever you roll initiative, you're setting a hard line
Mm-hmm.
between the conflict system and the rest of the game is a kind of inherently actiony choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're telling players to think differently when there is a conflict as opposed to outside it. And I'm not sure that was the correct choice here. There's a lot of things in Locus that were the correct choice. I'm not sold on the conflict system.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I will echo that. I think it's a really cool layout for a conflict system. I like how they do it. I like the dice roll against dice roll thing. But again, yeah, it absolutely feels like they're priming you for this, right? They're telling you that you're refocusing. And I think that it is not the way to go for this particular concept.
So I think that's a good addendum to that last takeaway. If you are used to a combat system, a combat based game, Locus probably isn't for you, and that playing it that way would kind of go against the grain. But I think to add on to that, if you are playing with people who are used to those games that want to branch out into something new, I think that is a discussion to really nail down in session 0, and even as you are approaching the game, that when you call for initiative, maybe just remind them that this isn't a completely separate battle instance that you have to work with. I'm not sure there's an easy fix without getting to homebrews and just tossing out rules and implementing new ones, which is not the purpose of RPGs Uncovered. I have a lot of really interesting ideas on how you could amend and sort of homebrew stuff for this game, but I think you could definitely take players who are used to a more battle instance D&D sort of thing. You just have to prep them specifically for this more narrative side of things.
I think so. Kat used the term like it's action time, right? I think that's actually really good, because putting that into what you were saying, Jack, the idea of having that conversation with your players beforehand, where you just go, this is the mini game, right? In the same way that in D&D combat's a mini game. This is the survival mini game. We have shifted from exploration and understanding and ambient like psychological horror to survival time. And in that like lens, I think it will be a lot easier for people to comprehend. We are not here to fight. We are here to survive. We are here to hide. We are here to trick it. We are here to whatever else. I think that's a really good way to frame it. Is it's still action time, but the mini game here isn't beat them with sticks until they are dead. It is find the way out.
So specifically to relate this back to Iron Coke and Conscious, I think the prime example of that was dealing with the Death Ingot. I love how you guys dealt with that situation, because that could have been a very dangerous fight. That was before I actually nailed down the damage rules. So in my mind, if the Death Ingot hit you, it was going to be a grievous injury. But that was not how the rules work. The enemy would have to score 4 or more net successes on the player's defense roll in order to do a grievous injury. So it does You know, somebody has the enemy has to roll real well, and the player has to roll real bad for higher level injuries to build up. But I do really like that you guys identified that it was scary and dangerous and trapped it. I think that was a great way to refocus away from just a D&D style punch face sort of slugfest, and helped make that a really interesting narrative way of dealing with a problem. Plus, it saved a lot of time. Because combat always takes a lot of time. It took you guys 2 rounds to get that thing locked in a what are those things called? Forge? I don't know.
Yeah.
Furnace, locked inside a
Furnace.
furnace. Whereas if you guys actually, tried to punch face that thing, we would be there for an episode and a half. So I think that was a great way of working with the system. But I think we can move away from combat. I think we covered everything we need to talk about as far as conflict. Though I will say, if we had more time with this series, it was my intention for the Gluttonous Gatekeeper to be a more social-based conflict instead of yet another combat. I was going to have that be primarily conversation based, and as it noticed what you were prioritizing, what you guys cared about most, it would try to isolate those things from you, and you would need to talk it down, offer it different things. Instead, it would try to turn you guys against each other. But as you worked to either outsmart it or to band together and thwart its attempts to to turn you against each other, any of those conversational successes would have tracked against the death's door and eventually wear the monster down from a conversational side of things. But we didn't have time for that, unfortunately. But that is included in the rules as part of at least the director's guide, if not part of how conflict is defined in the player's guide, that it can be used as a conversational tool instead of just punch face.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. What more can we talk about with Locus here? Lion, you said you had some thoughts on the just general attribute system and how it defines how the stats define your character, which I really agree with, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
I love the attribute system. And when I first saw it, I immediately was just like in love with it. I think thematically, it is such a perfect flavor win. It's so smart. I think mechanically, it works really, really well. I think they did a great job of covering all your bases too. There's no time where there were times where we had to make rolls and could discuss which of these would make the most sense. But I don't think there was ever a point where we were like, what would you roll for this? And if any of us were, it very quickly clicked once you like looked over the sheet again, right? I love this idea of we suck. Like that's kind of the thing, right? That's a running theme in Locus is even if you're not this level of terrible human being that we played for this game, even if you're just like a normal person, you still kind of everyone sucks a little bit somewhere, right? And this game is all about focusing on that, hyper fixating on that, and the fact that that is how the sheet is built and how the attributes are set up is absolutely brilliant. I love it so much. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Rolling against the number because you have to come in lower, so good. It's so good. I have nothing negative to say about it. I am a fan. And I think it was brilliant. I'm going to stop because I'm just repeating myself, but that's how much I love it. I really do love
it. Yeah, I would say the same thing, and I have said the same thing to other people I've told this game about. what I always say when I find a new system, when I talk to somebody about a new system, we talk about this a lot on Whip Workshop. Your attribute system, or whatever actionability definitions you have on your character sheet, presents a lens for the player to look at the world and to interact with the world in some way. So your attribute system, your skill system, whatever it may be, that is how the player is going to look at who their character is and how they act. And I really find it interesting that this game sort of takes the hero concept and completely flips it on its head, because in other games, most notably both of those D's out there, you are defining your character by how just godly disproportioned you are to the average human being, which has, depending on who you asked, an average score of between 4 and 10. But when you're starting your character out with attributes that can go up to 16, 18, 20 in some cases, you are defining your character in D&D, Pathfinder, other games like that, as being so much more powerful, and introducing them to the story as a heroic level character. And that is completely flipped on its head with Locus. Not only are you just an average person, you are an average person with problems, because average people have lots of problems. Or at least I hope average people have lots of problems, because I do. So being able to look at your character and you don't think, how strong and buff and crazy powerful am I? You have to ask yourself, how frail am I? And I think that really helps define who your characters are and the experience that they're going to have throughout this game. The fact that the attributes define themselves in the negative as opposed to something neutral or in the positive really helps shape the game.
Yeah, it makes character creation really fun to sit down and be like, what's the worst thing about this bastard?
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention to have the panic of, oh no, I have more points.
Yep.
Which is usually a good thing, and you're like, could I not? Could I?
No.
I don't
Do I
want
need
to
all
put
these
another point in
points?
frailty. Like, I'm already clumsy. Do I also have to be frail?
Yeah. Yep, it's not D&D point buy. Nobody's asking for 32 points anymore. Nope.
So
we
true.
Don't want it. We don't want the points.
Keep them. It's fine.
I found that to be a
Sitting
very
down-
refreshing take on character creation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting down and just being like, you know what? This character has no fuse.
Mm-hmm.
Forget short. She doesn't have one.
All right.
I would love to see this implemented in like more horror games or more games where the game wants to nitpick at your weaknesses, or wants you as the player to sort of, put those on display.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be really cool to see that more often. I am a huge fan.
I would say I think no, sorry.
No, that was just a little sound of agreement. I don't actually have anything interesting to say.
I will say one aspect in one aspect that I don't think the demo play really helped demonstrate was the skills in this game. There is an entire skill section to this game. I think it was discussed a few times on each of your characters as to whether it would be relevant for a specific role. And I think the only times it came up, it either was not relevant or mechanically unnecessary to use those skill bonuses that you were presented. So if I were to do this again, I would find more ways to build situations around the skills that you guys chose, or to specifically encourage you guys to pick skills that would have been more relevant to the situations you found yourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ability to take one of your scores down from, say, 3 dots to 1 dot is really helpful, or the ability to constantly make a difficulty check one step lower is mechanically very beneficial. It just didn't come up all that often in our demo play.
Yeah.
So
I
if
will
you've
say
made
I feel like that's common though in Locus
Mm,
because of the piece of these are normal people.
yeah.
And so I think there's definitely an art to trying to craft those characters and the plot around that. And I also, in thinking back to the other game I played, feel like we maybe had skills become relevant like once in
Mm,
the entire series, just because, again, it's like, well, if you're good at cooking, that doesn't really help when you are trying to navigate dogs who are chasing you in this exact
hmm
moment. Like, that's not going to help. On the other hand, if you need to cook something good to entice one of the monsters, like, that might be helpful. But you have to kind of recognize that those skills may not be as applicable to many situations
hmm
because these are normal people, and the things they're good at might not necessarily help in any given horror situation.
Right. Yeah, I think this comes back to the dichotomy of short game versus long format game. In a longer format game, you're going to have more opportunity to use a greater variety of skills. Or in a short format game, when the GM will tell you, here's the situation you find yourself in, pick skills that you know are going to be helpful, they might come up more frequently if you are that hands on and forward with your plans as a GM. But if you made it through the entire demo play and you're still like, what are these skills? They didn't talk about these skills. Sorry, I realized. But I think they are an interesting concept to the game, and I think when they do come up, it is definitely helpful, and it helps define the characters even more.
Mm.
All right.
It was at the very least helpful to do the skills from a character creation
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
Helps
Oh yeah.
define who you are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Do we have any more mechanic side insights, concerns, questions? Chat cast.
Mm.
No, nothing comes to mind. I mean, I like the way the Dust Store is set up.
Mm-hmm.
I really like we've talked about the cards already. Yeah. Yeah, I think with the single real exception in my opinion being the initiative conflict resolution system. Yeah, I really like everything that this
Mm-hmm.
game presents mechanically.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly when we were talking about the cards and hand size and all that, but I do really like what they have presented in the. I think they talk about it quite a bit in the player's guide, but also in the director's guide. Really helping to define what the Malice Locus is, what the different levels are, and how they can be distinct from each other. There's a whole chapter on how to set up your game and your story, talking about what the mystery is, what those core concepts can be, and then helping you walk through sort of like horror beat by beat, sort of how that can play out with pacing and signposts, and really finding ways to bounce your characters off the rules and tools of the game to navigate through your story. So I think there's a lot of really good stuff in the director's guide for anybody who wants to take a crack at running a game of Locus, which I think you really should, because it's a really this is, I probably say this with every game, but it's a really fulfilling GM position to have in this game, that helps facilitate such great character work. And I think this is especially true with this being an AP and you guys being amazing, creative, actual play performers. And I really got to sit back and just enjoy you guys doing amazing character work. And I think this is a game more than others that facilitates, especially in long format like we played, or even longer, as Kat and JD were saying, really helps facilitate bringing those characters out.
Actually, there is something I do want to bring up along that line for the maybe not the mechanics specifically, but something in the book, is the way it lays out the archetypes, the optimists, the pessimists, the different conceptual. I really like that because it allows you to take a very basic core character concept, look at that, and find a way to tie all those pieces together. Here are the things I know about the character, but without having ever played the game or knowing the way that the game is kind of going to work or run, it's a really useful tool for being able to take that, internalize it, and go, okay, so here are the basic like presentations of these characters, so that when I get into gameplay, I can already kind of know the mindset I need to follow.
Yeah.
And I think it's also really important, obviously, to not take those as like law, right? Like it's just a useful tool to help you start that focus and go from there. But I think it is. I think it's a fantastic tool. I really, really appreciate that being in there too. Because I know, for me specifically, like with Chad, what we settled on in our session zero talk and who Chad became as we played through wasn't exactly the same, right? Like where like because initially Chad was like the resigned optimist, right? And that shifted a lot throughout the course of like leading up to episode 1. But I never would have gotten there without having had those pieces in the book to start from. So I think that was really awesome to have.
Yeah, I think this game really does well with one of my favorite parts of exploring a new game system, and that is games that use character creation to help define who your character is. And I don't just mean how they act and how good they are at doing something. If I ask you to tell me about your character, I don't care what their stats are, what their skill values are, or what special abilities they have. Tell me how they think about things. Tell me how they feel about things. Tell me how they make their decisions. So I really like systems that build into character creation ways of looking at your background and ways of looking at your mental emotional processes, and really, building those prompts into your character sheet, whether they have a mechanical value or not. And I think there's we talked about the attitudes is a big part of that, and even to a lesser extent, the haunts and virtues are they do obviously have mechanical purposes to them, but they are also excellent prompts for how to play your character. You could say the same thing for stress and how much willpower you have, and especially the number of cards in your hands. There is a lot of things, irrespectful of the mechanic side, that provide prompts for role playing in this game, which I think is incredibly helpful for players who either are coming from completely different gameplay genres or are not yet well versed in role playing. Fortunately, we're all quite well versed in role playing, and we can use those prompts, and that helps us act as those characters and define those characters even more. But if you're not used to role playing, I think this is a great game and a great example of character creation that can help get you into role playing by providing you prompts right there on your own sheet. All right. So I think that more or less covers pretty much all the rules, tools, and themes that we've defined for Locus. So all in all, that's basically the analysis side of our review and analysis, and we've had plenty of commentary up until this point. I mean, from a general review, I think it's a great game. It's a really interesting, creative, well thought out game. Cobblepath, Ferne and Steph over there, the duo at Cobblepath, really put a lot of creativity and a lot of heart into this game. You can see that there is a lot of clearly a lot of emotion put into this game, a lot of creativity, a lot of enthusiasm put into this game. And it as Lion said, it does what it says on the tin, which is really important. It is a personal, existential, horror, mystery TTRPG, and it does what it says on its tin, especially with a little bit of buy-in from the player. But I think every game really requires a bit of buy-in, whether it's mechanically or narratively, to really get the best out of what is in the tin. So is this a game for your table? Just in review. Uh, First of all, if you like horror, if you like mystery, this is a great game for you. If you are a player or a GM that is more interested in being the hero and chopping off all of the Hydra's heads, this game probably isn't really going to be for you unless you're willing to really spin what you are used to and go down a completely different path. But it will require you to buy out of that heroic Herculean style player and into somebody that is a very average piece of shit. It doesn't have to be to the degree that, I encourage these three to be, but you are a very average person with a very real problem that you feel real feelings about. So if you are an emotionally invested player or GM, this is an excellent, excellent game for you. Unless you are a happy, cozy game GM or player, then this is not the game for you. I'm sorry, I can't spin it to make
Don't
it
do it.
make it a game for you. This is not a cozy game. It's not going to work out. This is a game where negativity is literally built into every cornerstone of the system and the story. But I like that it does present hope, and it does present a means to get out if you can manage. Lion, what do you got?
Oh, I was just gonna say it. Now I can't help but sit here and think about a game of Locus that starts exactly like that. It is the little cozy, nice, calm, and then watching everything spiral out of control as you find out all these wonderful, loving people that you are close with and kind with and friendly with are all terrible human beings on the DL, and the
Lion,
world
you
just
need to
slowly
run that
burns
game.
around you.
You need to run that. That sounds perfect.
You know what? Maybe I will. I'll have all y'all on and we'll make it happen.
Pro-
Let's do it.
Probably even more of a slow burn than this one. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
the vibe I was going for with this. Having at least the audience not know how messed up you guys were. But you guys,
Sure.
we started out you guys being best of friends and hanging out, and we ended with one of you murdering the other and leaving the other stranded in some nightmare
Yeah.
place. Uh, but no, I think that would be a very interesting game to run.
You just start full Animal Crossing.
Yep,
and go
full
from
Animal
there.
Crossing, and then it goes real dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are inherently a cozy gamer, unfortunately, this is just not going to be the case. But I think you probably already found that out. But I think all in all, it's a very simplistic, at least from the mechanical side of things. It's a very simple game. Every time you need to roll dice, it's always 3d6. Sometimes it's a check that you need to beat your own value listed on your sheet for, or sometimes it's an opposed check. But those are two very easy instances, rule cases to switch between. Other than that, it's very very straightforward. The GM, takes care of most of, the back end card hand size sort of situations, and you just need to be attentive and respectful of your stress level and your willpower, and the cards you have in your hand. And other than that, it's a very easy game to play. Would you guys agree? It's a very easy game to play.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think maybe harder to run, but to play,
Yes.
100%. Yeah, I think it's very, very straightforward.
That is a good distinction. On the player side, it's a very easy game to play. On the GM side, I believe, JD, you were saying this, a lot of balls to keep in the air, lots to juggle.
100%. Yeah.
But I will say, your players won't notice that you dropped half of them, because I did. So I mean, I think that's a good lesson that every GM needs to learn. It's like playing an instrument. Unless you are playing for somebody else who masterfully knows how to play that instrument, the average listener isn't going to notice if you get a note off here or there.
Yeah, you're fine. Just keep going. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are things to consider if you want to be the GM. Obviously, you have to encourage the players to play the game and to create characters, along the grain and along the style that is Locus. But there are a lot of things to keep track of. You have to keep track of the cards. You have to keep track of injuries and dice. keep track of all the interpersonal things that are going on. I don't think that's necessarily heavily built into the rules, but I really enjoyed how each of you had ties to each other, good and bad, and working back and forth. Uh, and then monster creation and all of that is an entirely different beast, and having to deal with the complexities of conflicts come up. But I would not say it's a difficult game at all, especially from a mechanical side of things. Even on the GM side of things, it's an incredibly easy mechanical game to play. So if you are sort of daunted by having too many dice or too many floating variables or too many rules cases to have to worry about, you don't need to worry about that for Locus. If you are a more narrative GM, I think you are going to have a great time with this game. Conversely, if you are not if you are not the most plot organized narrative GM, and you prefer games that are more mechanically, systematically robust, this game might not be for you, but I would still suggest you take a look at it and see what you can work out, because again, there are so many great resources in the director's guide that will take somebody who is not used to playing, or watching, let alone playing horror like me, and really provide you a lot of good examples and prompts and signposts to help you tell a great story and run a great game.
Jack, could I just throw one other thing in?
Please.
I know we talked a lot about this in our first session when we were talking about, well, all of the areas that we always cover in that. But one thing that feels important to highlight when you're thinking about running this is the group that you're going to have at the table.
Yes.
And safety, because
Always important.
that, is something where there were already a lot of ties between the cast here. And
Mhm.
the thing with Locus that I would say is different than some other horror games is because it is psychological horror. It goes into really dark territory
Mhm.
really fast. And that, I was reflecting on the idea of like a one shot and just thinking about the personal haunts people might have chosen.
Yeah.
And if that is a brand new group sitting down at the table for the first time together ever, it could go off the rails pretty
Mhm.
quickly.
Mhm.
So really also reflecting on what is the makeup of the table going to be, what are the safety tools that are being used, and depending on the length of the game, how are you going to balance being able to dig into really dark, horrific material in a way that feels safe for everybody at the table.
Exactly. Yes, extremely important. I include that in every learning the game first season episode. It's always very important to do a good session zero, use safety tools. I believe that is even explicitly built into either the player's guide and or the director's guide. But even if it's not, I'm pretty sure it is, but even if it's not, don't play Locus without safety tools. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Nope,
It's not
not
fair to
worth.
you. It's not fair to your players. It's not fair to the game and the game's creators. This is a game that you have to give consent to feel uncomfortable with, and there are
Yeah.
there are degrees of uncomfortable that you need to be aware of, because people can buy into a game that they are emotionally invested in, that they can be uncomfortable with, that things can upset them and scare them and make them sad, but they have to be forewarned about that and give you consent to do that. And I think, as JD just said, it's very easy with this game being a very personal, very existential horror game, that if you are playing with people you are not used to, one person's haunt can really trigger somebody in a bad way. So session zero is extremely important. I say don't play any game without a session zero or safety tools, but
Yes.
Locus,
Yeah.
you have to. You have to.
I would also like to add to that again, for any game, but especially for something like Locus, safety does not end at session zero. That's so important, and I know a lot of people make this mistake, not maliciously or anything, of going, well, we went over this, session 0 happened, we're done, and it's so important to remember that that's not how it works. It's important to keep in mind the people that are around you, feeling safe enough to communicate with each other, either publicly or privately, in whatever way works for people around you, but make sure those lines of communication are open. Make sure that you are in a place where you, if you are running the game, are able to check in with people, because I think that's also really important. With a game like Locus, my personal recommendation is always, at the end of any session, check in with your players. Take at least a couple of minutes to decompress, because it can get, especially as you get further into it, it can get really intense. Communication lines have to stay open. Safety is always important. Review any safety tools you have before any session. That's the other thing that I think is so important. Because look, we're all human. Everyone forgets things. It's not necessarily malicious. You're not trying to be mean or cruel or hurt anyone, but we all forget stuff. Take 5 minutes. Look over the sheet before every session. Talk to the people before anything that you feel like might move into one of those places. Make sure those lines are always open, always clear, and everyone feels comfortable talking about these things, because otherwise you do risk someone getting hurt.
Excellent advice, always. All right. Well, I think that covers the general review and analysis portion of our episode. So I think this is a great time for us to take a break, because I do still want to have a conversation about the entire length of our demo play, the whole Iron Coke and Conscience, and especially that finale. But I wanted to start off with exactly what it says on my tin with the final review and analysis. So thanks for hanging out, and you know, hopefully you have a better understanding of whether Locus is a game for you and your table. I hope it is. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun. Fun in a very different way than other games are fun, but it's a lot of fun. And if this is a game that you want to check out and you haven't looked into it already, go back. Check out the Learning the Game episode. It's a long one, but we cover it all at once. Feel free to, you know, chop it up into pieces, watch it piecemeal. But we also have tutorials coming out. We already have the basic mechanics tutorial up on YouTube, and I have ones on stress and willpower and one on conflict coming up that should be out within the next week. So stay tuned for those. And of course, if you haven't seen it already, go back and watch or finish Iron Coke and Conscience, because it was a great story, and I do think it really did demonstrate most, if not all, of the rules pretty well for Locus. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to do a deep dive into our own actual play and our own story. We'll see how many secrets I can reveal, how much backstage content I can give you, and I'm really interested to see what these guys have to say about their characters and all the situations they come up with. So check back in about 10 minutes for our sort of live extended after show. We'll be back in a little bit, guys. Enjoy some tunes.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. We are back. Back from break, back to our final episode of this season. It's been a great season. We have just gotten done talking about our final review and analysis. More or less, that part of the show is complete. By now, I think you guys should have a fairly good understanding of whether whether Locus is a good game for you as a GM, as a player, as a table, and know how to find the resources to to help get you at that table. So let's move on and talk about Iron Coke and Conscience. It was a crazy finale. It was a very deep, very nuanced, crazy entire season run, and we didn't have any time after the finale to really talk about everything that happened. So I like to take this time after the review and analysis is complete and do sort of a live extended after show. So let's see what that's all about, and it's a good way to help promote and demonstrate what you might get from similar after shows on air Ko-fi. So if you want to on an episode by episode basis get our immediate reactions, little commentaries and secrets from what just happened, you can go support us on Ko-fi, and we have after shows after almost every after every show. If time constraints make that a problem, I have to respect the time of my fantastic cast and let them get on with things. But if we have time for it, we do a fun after show, whether it's 10 minutes or half an hour. It's always a great discussion. But let's talk Iron, Coke, and Conscience. So just as further demonstration, anytime we do an after show, my first question is everybody having fun? In this case, did everybody have fun? Did you enjoy our game? Excellent. All right, so where do we even start for this extended after show? What do you guys want to start with? Do we want to start from the beginning and really pick this apart, or do you want to dive straight into everything that happened last week?
Mm. Hmm.
I can throw out my usual stock questions, but I'm happy to let you guys run the show here and ask me questions, give me prompts, talk about things you guys want to talk about.
Hmm.
I think probably the best way to go from here would probably focus on the last episode and then talk about the overall.
Yeah.
Right, because that way we're still kind of hitting the same like.
Yeah. So focusing on the finale. Let's see. Unfortunately, it's been a week, and they are always long weeks. So this finale, I know exactly how we ended, but how we began. We were out front of the steel bubble, and two of our three cast were having to deal with the gluttonous gatekeeper, and Roman decided to jump through the steel bubble and go off on his own. And you guys had immediate reactions to that, Cat and Lion, or I should say Laura and Chad. That was a very interesting way of dealing with the situation. Not just the steel bubble, but also the gluttonous gatekeeper. Due to time constraints, I really had to truncate things a lot. So in my notes, that is not how it was intended to go down. They were sort of supposed to be two separate instances, but I think it really helped add to and shape the narrative, and especially the tension, both the story tension and the interpersonal tension, by shoving those two elements together and making you deal with both at the same time. So JD, your idea of having a conversation with a statue and then jumping into the steel bubble somehow, it was a really creative use of Roman's particular skill set, and the fact that he was so far down into the depths of the Malus Locus.
Yeah, there were a lot of factors that converged, and I don't think it could have been in any more of a beautiful way, because Roman was drugged thanks to
Mm-hmm.
Chad. Roman was deep in the levels of the Malus Locus, and I really loved that opportunity because, as I'd said at the end of the episode before the finale, there was a moment where I thought maybe Roman's just going to push one of the statues through, but they weren't statues anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make sense for Roman, anyways, because he's not a strength based character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, physically, that is not where his skill set, such as it is, lies. And so it was just that perfect moment of, no, he's going to convince someone else to do this for him. He's going to use someone else for this. And all of it, the fact that he was drugged, the fact that he was so deep in it, it just created one of those moments where his true nature really shone through,
Mm-hmm.
and I think highlighted everything as we then went into the finale and the decisions Roman made.
And I think Roman's sort of plea to this ghost, basically to sacrifice itself for the betterment of all the other ghosts, the people of Jolston, the entire situation, when really I think Roman's actual purpose was a lot more selfish. I think really helped set the foundation for everything that came next.
Yeah, because Roman didn't help anybody get out of Jolston.
Nope.
And he never planned to.
So was it your intent while making that speech that you were just using this ghost as yet another asset?
Oh, 110%.
All right.
Yeah, there was not
no
a
genuine
drop of
compassion
anything
there.
Yeah. No.
Excellent. Excellent. Of course, from the other two of our cast, the other two characters, they saw Roman walk over to an inanimate statue, have a one-sided conversation, and then lunge headfirst into a solid steel bubble and somehow make it through. And of course, he did. The ghost sort of rusted it away. It was starting to close. Very interesting that Laura, your first response, or Kat, Laura's first response, was to try to pull him out. What was going through your head with that?
Laura's extremely impulsive, so I don't know that there was a what. I think it was just he vanished in there. Why did he get him? Grab him. Why is he in there?
Sure.
Like, I don't know that if Laura were asked, she could explain why she did it, only that, like, at that point, she was still convinced that they needed to leave together, and so there, part of that was almost certainly, like, she is mad. And she's, I don't know, she's mad, get it?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
It's Laura, she doesn't think.
It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. But Lion, Chad, on the other side of things, you had a very visceral, very emotional response to Roman abandoning you. What was that like?
It was twofold. So for Chad, it was really interesting because, you know, Chad had just recently drugged Roman, and there's this thing where it was just waiting for the opportune moment to confront Roman about the things that had happened and some of the issues that were starting to become clear, and then to punish Roman and make him hurt, because that's what Chad likes to do.
So part of that was feeling like you were robbed of your opportunity to do that because he ran away.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah. And then the other side of that is, even with the visceral hatred that had been bubbling up in Chad for Roman, it was still that moment of, he just fucking left me? Or us, technically. But there was definitely that too. So it was both the anger and frustration of being denied what he deserves and being betrayed again while still trying to process and make right the first betrayal.
First,
because
second, third.
something like that. Well, because for Chad, I still can't really tell you if Chad was definitively like going to kill Roman at that point. Like, he drugged Roman, he definitely wanted to make Roman suffer, he definitely wanted to make him hurt. But I think in Chad's mind there was definitely at least that moment of like, well, you've paid your dues, you've made it up to me, and I love you. We're fine. I forgive you now. but he doesn't even get that opportunity.
Yep.
And I think that was part of what made it so angry. And it got to the point where it's like we're you know staring down what is effectively the monster's version of Chad's father, and it's
That was not helping the situation.
No, not at all.
Which I did
And-
very purposefully.
Oh, it was so good. And it got to the point where it's like, fuck it. Once again, you can have what you want, but I need this. I need this. So that's what was going through Chad's mind at that point.
I really like that you guys decided to try to outsmart or work with, make a deal with the gluttonous gatekeeper, because that was far more interesting than the next 10 rounds of combat we were going to have to get through in order for you guys to punch face him down. But I think that was very interesting because it really helped to demonstrate where each of you were at with respect to each other and what your goals were, and just the sense that you were willing to make a deal with what I'm sure Chad identified as, you know, partly his monster.
Yep.
Very interesting deal that you made there.
Yeah, I absolutely loved Laura's response to that, which was just the what the fuck, because it was perfect. It was so perfect. It's like, yeah, you can have me. It's fine. Fuck it. I need him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the Malice Locus, one monster to another, they have their own distinctions, but they are very much all integrated into that murky negativity soup that is the Malice Locus. So I feel like I could tell you guys now that you're at the end, the gluttonous gatekeeper, it was a win-win deal for him. Because I think he knew the way the winds were blowing, and that you guys were going to have a very difficult time getting what you wanted out of the Roman confrontation. So he was very happy to make that deal and sit back and watch the carnage. I think that was one of the most interesting aspects from from my perch on the GM side of the screen, seeing pretty much all of the big bad monsters just sort of sitting in lounge chairs eating popcorn while you guys tear each other apart at the end. Loved it.
Yeah.
So you kind of forestalled me on my next question, but do you know when, you know, what the moment was when Chad knew he was going to try to kill Roman?
Whoa. No. I know that's not a great answer.
No, that's a great.
The truth is that I think for Chad, there was never a moment for him where it was he has to die. I think he wanted that to be true. He absolutely wanted that to be true. And once they got down there and realized that Roman had betrayed him, I think there was this moment of, well, I might have to kill him. But even then, I don't think it was something he was resolved to do. You know, he goes up to Roman and he's fighting him for the gun, right? We're not too far off from just the molten pile of metal. Just shove him in there and be done with it. Try and knock him in or something, or just punch him in the face. But he didn't do any of those things because that wasn't his intent, at least yet. It was, he has to be stopped first. He has to be disarmed first. He has to feel weak before he is hurt. Does he have to die? No. All of this can be used to remind him why he needs me. He doesn't have to die. So I don't think there was a moment, right? And even with my favorite, I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but it ties in really well, so I hope it's okay. Like my favorite moment from that last episode was when Roman turned the gun on himself and was like, I'm the only one who can get us out of here. If you do anything, I'm gonna pull the trigger. And Chad's like, no, the fuck you won't. Just immediately steps forward because you know. And and it was something where, for me as the player behind Chad, I was surprised at how quickly the response was. Yeah, we're just moving forward. Bullshit. We're just gonna go. And I love those moments for myself where I have those realizations about my characters and where the character just does the thing, and then I have to figure out like where that came from. And I think I think that ties into the question you're asking, because I don't think there was ever a point where Chad was definitively like, "You are going to die here, Roman." I don't think that was ever the only outcome in Chad's mind.
Excellent. Excellent. No, I love when playing a character makes you psychoanalyze that character and yourself. I love it.
That's my favorite thing.
So on the other side of that equation, Roman, you ran off from the group first in the bubble, solved the very small puzzle of the safe and the lock. I had a lot of fun with that scene, and I love the way that you took it, because I outlined that scene with the ghost and the phone call, and by the end of that, you're like, okay, my hands, my father's hands, my grandfather's hands, they're clean. It's this asshole that's causing the problem. That did not last long, but I loved that was enough for Roman to justify everything. Just this one little phone call, one side of a little phone call, and that's what he took from that. But I'm glad that puzzle, was very straightforward. You went with that, you got it, and then we got down into the Malice Locus proper, the heart of the Malice Locus, and you got into the safe. Were you at all surprised by what was in the safe?
No, no, I mean it tracked. I don't know if I went into it with any specific expectation. I think Roman just went into it knowing this is important in some way, shape, or form. And speaking of surprises, I mean, it surprised me and yet didn't surprise me that Roman's immediate response was, okay, time to burn this stuff. Like, very quickly, made that switch from my family's hands are clean to my family's hands are dirty, and I need to fix that.
Did you make that decision before before your monster, the Broken Heart Army, made its argument? Were you already resolved to that?
I was already resolved to that.
All right.
Roman knew that he was going to destroy all of the papers in that safe. The Broken Heart Army just added to the mix, because then it was, well, now I have the protection that I need and deserve.
Was there any hesitation in taking that deal?
It felt like there should have been, but there wasn't. I mean, there was that tiny bit of Roman being like, but you wronged me. Like, you were so terrible to me. You tried to destroy my life, and I really shouldn't forgive that, but now you're where you should be, and now you're doing what I want of you, and how can I not take that deal? I don't think there was ever... It's hard to imagine a scenario. There probably is one, where Chad and Roman's friendship is not as frayed as it was at that point, but it's hard to imagine a scenario where Roman wouldn't give in to temptation, since that is his haunt.
Yeah, exactly. I designed each of your monsters very specifically based off of your haunt, and to play off of your haunt, and to be best defeated by the virtues of your teammates. Unfortunately, by that point, all of you were so torn apart from each other that you guys weren't going to help each other get through your problems. Nope. But I find it interesting that Roman did believe that that his monster was now in its proper place, doing work for him. I'm sure you, as JD, don't need to be told that the monster definitively knows that Roman is working for it.
Yes, 100%. Nothing would convince Roman otherwise, though. Roman definitely was just like, this monster is working for me, and would just point to the fact that he was able to make it through that fight with Chad in a way he never could have without that. So everything is as it is supposed to be.
Yeah, if you didn't make that deal, you would not have survived that final confrontation. Yeah, so Roman basically took a significant part of the Malus Locus and a defining negativity of himself, released it from the confines of the Malus Locus, and sometime in the future will create a Malus Locus of his own. So that's a very interesting sort of fade to sepia cyclical story arc to end us off with. Unfortunately, we didn't see very much from Laura's monster. I don't think I even named it. I mean, I did name it, but I don't think I ever told you guys the name. It showed up actually quite a lot, but it was never confronted, unfortunately. We just ran out of time. Kat, do you have any interesting thoughts on how we saw at least a little bit of your monster and how that went?
Not really. Not really.
All right.
The story wasn't about me. It was about the boys. I was just there, so.
I think, unfortunately, that is more or less how it played out. I was hoping to get Laura much more involved in the situation because I believe Laura knew some pretty damning evidence, pretty damning information on both of the boys.
The boys were doing great.
Yeah.
It was the correct choice.
Yeah, they were going against each other well enough. But I attempted to use your monster, which is the 1,000 Scheming Hands, to purposely try to pit the boys against each other, and to sabotage the group as a whole, to make Laura believe that these two were dragging her down, so that Laura would turn on them when it became the opportune time. I'm not sure we ever...
Boys against each other.
What was that?
Not hard to turn the boys against each other.
Apparently it wasn't. It was not difficult. It was not difficult to turn the boys against each other, though it was surprisingly difficult to get any of you to actually conversate, let alone fight with each other until the very end. You guys were very good at, let's stomp this down, we'll deal with it later, until everything exploded in the last hour.
Yeah, Chad very much is of the mind that when they're doing the thing, they're doing the thing, and for him it's the slow burn, right? So the stuff with like Laura's monster was really good and was something that I was planning, or that I felt like Chad was planning to address down the line, and we saw it a little bit with Roman being like, she's fucking with us, and Chad being torn between being like, yeah, probably, but also, yes, Roman, let's isolate you more. Sure. And at that point, it was, even if she is messing with us, Chad is confident enough in himself that he's not worried about Laura being able to stop any of what he's doing, or to, cause him enough detriment that it needed to become the focus until after he was done dealing with Roman. And then when Roman was either dead or had been punished and brought back in, then they could deal with Laura, in Chad's mind.
Very reasonable. Unfortunately, we just ran out of time for the rest of that story to develop, and then things exploded towards the end. But the 1,000 Scheming Hands, I really enjoyed making all three of your monsters, and I have write-ups for each of them. I'm not going to give everything away because it's one of the main draws of the Patreon. If you wanna get the cool GM side of things, come hang out on our Patreon. It's a great way to support what I'm trying to do here with RPGs Uncovered. So I'm not gonna give away all of my secrets, but I had a lot of fun designing each of these monsters. I do like that the Gluttonous Gatekeeper was the one that saw the actual actual conflict. We got a little bit of that with the Broken Heart Army working alongside Roman in that final fight, but that was necessary for it to be even close to a fair fight. And it would have been very interesting. I think one thing, we didn't really see the Crucible Dragon at all. The main problem of the Malus Locus, the main demon at its heart, the BBEG of our entire story, we didn't really address because everything fell apart, before we even really got to that point. So you got down to the final arena, and nobody was concerned with the giant forge dragon in the background. I mean, I know at that point, all of you guys, all of your characters were so invested in dealing with each other. But what was that like from a player's standpoint? Did that click with you the same way it did to me, that there's just four terrifying monsters back there watching you guys go at it, or were you just so zeroed in on what you were doing?
I feel like they did fade into the background a bit as the scene went on, but I was never unaware of the fact that there was that presence. It felt very thematically appropriate, with Locus being what it is and the way our relationships had fractured, that at the end of the day, that terrifying dragon, and the other monsters there were not our biggest concern. Our biggest concern was each other, and that was such an interesting dichotomy, because it's like, here is this huge, terrifying creature, and it doesn't even matter. It's just watching us destroy each other.
Yeah, I was always, like, as a player, I thought it was really cool the way that whole scene played out, and having them there effectively munching on popcorn. But I did really appreciate how, because of the way things had been laid out, for Chad, he didn't give a shit about the dragon. Who cared? At this point, so for me, it was a really interesting kind of shift, right, from the beginning of the series, where they first encounter, like, the ghosts. And the other two were like, and Chad is like, what the fuck?
Chad was
and
freaking out.
Chad, focus. We have shit to do. And now here we are at the end, and there's a literal dragon and a giant face-changing three-headed spider woman. And Chad is like, all right, cool, whatever, you. And I was really happy with the way that was. But yeah, it definitely was very much in the background. He didn't care at all. I appreciated the way that played out.
I will say, unfortunately, and I did feel bad about it while it was happening, I think Laura got the short end of the stick on that particular encounter.
I wasn't needed there.
And I think Laura's presence was very needed.
I wanted to deal with the dragon, but this scene wasn't about me. It was about the boys, so I was like, let's let them have it.
But I really loved what you did with, essentially, as you say, your character being sort of a side character to the scene. I love that you wedged yourself in there explosively.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really important. You were a part of it, and it was this really interesting then interaction, because the boys are fighting.
The boys are fighting. Presidential alert.
But, like, Laura's also like, I need to stop this by any means necessary. Like, we need to get out of here, and that's the focus. And I loved the fact that you kept bringing that in different ways to the point where it became explosive.
And the amount of times you flip sides.
They weren't listening.
Yeah, I think that's really important to point out too, is that, like we said, yes, the focal point of that scene was on the boys, but you were the resolution. Laura was how that story, that scene, that interaction came to a conclusion, and I thought that was really good.
Somebody had to cause a huge explosion.
Yeah.
You have to have at least one, right?
I couldn't think of anything else to do, and the harder I thought about it, the more I realized you're thinking more than Laura would, and then I threw the bag.
Yeah. But unfortunately, by that point, you had multiple major injuries, so you were taking a penalty there.
Yeah.
I finally managed to get a condition off of somebody, so you were even more penalized there, being blinded and coughing.
Bully someone who matters. Don't bully me. Come on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you got the closest to the dragon, who just wanted to be involved somehow.
He wanted to feel important.
Yeah.
I get it. It's a dragon thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then it I don't remember exactly at what point it was, but I remember specifically during the last episode, I was just in my head I was like, okay, that's it. Everyone's getting the bad ending. And I love it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, everybody did get the bad ending. Chad's dead in a pretty horrific way.
Yeah.
Laura's stuck in this place that she was vehemently trying to get out of, and Roman survived, which is punishment.
Mm.
Roman
I
got
hated
everything he wanted.
I hated that so much.
Mhm.
I have never wanted a character to die more than I wanted Roman to die, and I both love and hate the fact that he was the only one who walked out of there.
Yep.
Because I love then that cyclical nature. Like, my family just keeps creating these.
Yep.
We keep doing these horrible things, and I am now a part of that cycle. And I also was like, he did not deserve to leave.
It's almost like you
No.
could take this entire show as a commentary on capitalism. That wasn't intentional. Yeah, don't read too much into that. No, I adored the finale of this show. It was fantastic. It was so different from any other finale we've had so far because as I'm sure you guys know, in more, I guess, traditional games, though I don't think that's the right word, more both of the D's and finding those paths and all of those other things. The finale is the BBEG fight in the arena with the guards on the walls and the lava pits and the fire and things falling from the ceiling. But the finale in this is you guys just going after each other, switching sides back and forth, dealing with your own internal problems, projecting them on other people. It was crazy, and I love that you guys were so invested in your characters, in your other character, in each other's characters, and so comfortable with yourselves, your characters, each other as players, me as the GM, to be that invested in that role and that dark towards the end, because that was a dark scene. Like I said, bad endings for everybody. So
Yeah, it's been a while since I've gotten the opportunity to really explore that, and I'm really glad that we got that chance here. And I know I've said this before, but I mean it. I could not think of a better group of people to have sat here and explored this with than the three of y'all. I think everyone absolutely crushed it. It was so good, and the ability to just go in this story, in this situation, with these relationships was, like you said, it was really dark, and it's very different from what you generally will find at the end of even other like horror games. Like, how often does it devolve into this? This just if you will excuse my language, this absolute hate fuck, because that's kind of what that whole episode was from top to bottom, right? And I thought that was phenomenal. I loved it, and like you said, yeah, it was just this raw emotional shared moment of storytelling, which is like my favorite thing.
yes.
Organic, that's the magic word I always use, right?
Yes.
I've managed to avoid it throughout all of today, but organic. It was this beautiful, organic, raw, emotional, passionate moment, scene, episode, and I thought it was great.
Now I do have to wonder what decision, what branching path in this particular story could have allowed you guys to come together at least enough to either take the papers and run as a way to get out, or to actually find a way to work together and defeat the Forge Dragon. Do you guys think that was ever a possibility, and at what point that fell apart?
I mean, the drugs, right?
No, I mean,
that was a
the
line
first
in the
one that
sand.
comes to mind, yeah.
That was a
I
chasm
mean, the
deep line in the
drugs, right?
sand.
Yep. I was gonna say, yeah, the drugs are a big one, and I mean, JD even remarked during that finale where it's like, would Roman have been able to do all this if he wasn't drugged? Maybe not. And I love that. For Chad, it's so easy to say, yeah, absolutely, an apology, and we would have been done. But would that have ever happened? No. That's all it would have took. That's it. I fucked up, Chad. I'm sorry. I got you, bro, and we would have been fine. No way it ever happened, and I love that for them.
Yeah, I was gonna say my thought is the answer is no with these particular characters
Yeah.
because I don't think it would have taken a lot to convince Roman that it was worth like revealing what his family had done. That would have been a challenge at the best of times. And if the only way Chad and Roman were going to get back on the same page is Roman apologizing, that's not going to happen. So
No way.
there's not going to be any way for Roman to have any buy-in to, hey, maybe it's worth it to not destroy these, and give us all a chance to get out.
So, before the Thousand Scheming Hands aired all of your dirty laundry out to each other, when Roman heard of the suits from Arcadia coming and looking for something, did you foresee this being the inevitable conclusion, that there was no way that you were going to not side with your family? Because you had to have seen that there was something fishy going on here associated with your company. Once Roman figured that out, was that a foregone conclusion?
I think as we saw, there was a lot of denial there. Like, there was always the question in Roman's mind of, is my family innocent in this? That one-sided phone conversation just confirmed that for him. So I think he was always open to there being multiple options. He wanted to know what was so important that it was being looked for, but I think he wasn't convinced that it was damning evidence. I think he was considering, is this actually not damning evidence? Like, is this actually evidence that would help my father's company? And that is why it's so important. But yeah, there was also the thought of like, that's a lot of people that you're expending there. I would do that too, but that's still a lot of people that you're expending there.
Yep, every one of those golden statues was a paycheck for the company. I do want to go back and also address one more time, Kat, what you were saying, that it wasn't Laura's story, it was the boys' story. But
Yeah.
Laura was incredibly instrumental in telling that story, not only as your character, but as the monster your character provided, because the Thousand Scheming Hands was the one that pretty much poked everyone with all the sticks. Those are the hands I was using to poke each of you guys and tossing the sticks around. It was the Thousand Scheming Hands that pointed Chad in the direction of the letter, having that being seen. It was them who pointed out the locket in the fanny pack, and all of these little sabotage pieces to pit them against each other. And interestingly enough, I believe they both at some point went to you, Laura, to discuss it as a middleman.
No,
No?
that never happened.
No?
No, they just sulked on their problems and then yelled at each other and then did gun.
Yeah, there was
I
the
listened
closest
in
was
on one of them.
That's true. Yeah, the closest is in that final episode where there's that conversation about Roman just leaving them.
Yeah.
Right, where Chad is like, fuck this. But yeah, I don't think there was a conversation had about that.
No, I
between them,
listened
yeah.
in when the boys were having the one argument, but aside from that, no, I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, there was Laura and Chad kind of teaming up at the end. And I thought there was a conversation with.
There was a brief moment with Roman where we were like, "Hey, how long's Chad gonna be useful? Because he's using all his."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't
I was
really.
like, I knew there was a moment.
Yeah.
In my mind, that
about
was a
personal
more.
stuff.
That was a bigger scene. That was a bigger conversation than I suppose it was. But
mean, I
it
think
was
it
just
was
that small scene,
significant.
I suppose.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, even though it might have been small, I think like the fact that Roman was willing to acknowledge, I am starting to see Chad as being like fully disposable, was significant, and seeing that side of Laura was also significant for Roman. Like seeing that she was on board with that, because I don't know if he'd fully seen. He knew
Very
some
carefully
of,
that he
like-
had.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think there was always a sense of what Laura could have been capable of, but I think that could have become something much bigger had we not then had Roman drugged and then, gone straight into the finale, because that would have been, I think, very interesting to see both like Chad and Laura and then Roman and Laura.
Yeah.
And Laura being the one like scheming between them as she always was, keeping in mind at what point do these boys become expendable, and at what point do I decide to take them out?
Yep.
And I think also, if I remember correctly, Laura approached Roman about that, right? That was Laura being like, all right, when does Chad become this problem? When do we have to solve it? And it was Laura dropping the mask, which I really enjoyed. I liked that it was, it felt perfectly on brand for her, being like, I recognize that you recognize this, and I recognize that I have to show you this. So let's do it.
And I do have to remind myself, it was always my intention for Laura to be sort of that middle person.
Yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, the second episode really got away from me. And then we lost one of the episodes through nobody's fault. Unfortunately, we just had to shave an episode off. So in my notes, in my own internal pacing, I was already behind like an episode and a half, and unfortunately, Laura just didn't play as big of a direct impact. But I think directly or indirectly, Laura was a much needed fulcrum for the boys to teeter back and forth with, because I think if Laura wasn't there, this would have been such an incredibly different story.
True.
Either very quickly tragic, or actually not at all.
Yeah, just immediately shoot each other in the car. Like, don't even go to Jolston.
But no, I think Laura was incredibly important.
Just
in that
get shot
finale.
in the car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if you had not thrown the explosives, that ending would have looked so
I had no
different, I
idea
think.
why I did that. Don't
no,
ever
it was
ask
perfect.
me why I did that. I have
It was
no
so on
idea.
brand. It was so on brand for
Love
Laura, and it was really what led to each of the endings. I know, Jack, you were saying like I'm not quite sure when I knew everyone was getting a bad ending. I feel like that was one of the pivotal moments where it was like things are escalating to like an even higher degree than they had been. People are getting incredibly devastatingly injured, and there is a high personal risk, and it makes sense that Laura was the one who took that. Like as Lion was pointing out, Roman wasn't going to pull the trigger on himself. He was struggling to pull the trigger, on Chad.
Yeah.
And with Laura then blowing things up, like that was, things are really, really, really getting real.
Yeah.
I was just hoping to do a distractee. I didn't know it would be a big problem.
I mean, detonating a bomb at 3 people's feet is pretty distracting, to be fair.
You said that we needed to have it in a crucible or something to make it do a proper explosion.
Well, no, to make it a direct.
To make it a directed explosion, it needed to be packed.
Like, flare up, and everyone would be like, "What's that?" And then take the gun. I didn't think it would do murders.
Well,
I loved it.
My bad for not being more explicit there.
I think that was perfect, though. I think it really worked out,
Laura
and I think it makes sense because Laura hadn't.
Yeah.
How would Laura know? What would lead Laura to think that would happen? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about asking, but then I was like, no, Laura doesn't know. Laura
Fucking go for it.
And I'm sure this being the heart of the Malice Locus added to that explosion as well.
Probably.
As soon as I heard you say I'm gonna throw the coke in the steel, I knew it was
Throw it
gonna
in the
be a
hole.
huge explosion, whether it
Yeah, that's valid.
physically made sense or not. I don't think metallurgical coke explodes to that degree. I think it would have been a very large flare. Certainly, probably more in line what Kat you were thinking. But this is even further down in the Malice Locus than I even originally intended you guys to get to. I designed 4 levels, and I think the because that was at 8 cards, and Roman was operating at 12 to 14 cards or something at that point.
Yep.
So that was always going to be a huge explosion. I think it was before that point though that I determined you guys were all getting the bad ending. I think it was, and I think it was when Chad made the deal with his monster.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, by that point, by the point Chad did that, he already was like, "We're not getting out of here.
Yeah.
Fuck it." Like that was already a thing. I think by the point that he gave the bottle to Roman was when, for Chad at least, it was like, "We're not getting out of here, but this is what's gonna happen while we're here." I think for him. So I think Chad at least was resigned to the bad end from about that point. I had an inkling that we were getting to the bad end around the same time, where I'm like, okay, well, I don't think there's any like I forget who said it, but it created that chasm, right? I know Kat pointed out the drugs was like the moment, where it's like, could anything have been fixed after that? Well, no. And I think it really was. I think it's it's exactly the moment where it was like, there's no way that this ends well for anyone.
All right. Well, I think that covers all the big key moments of the finale, right? So let me throw it to you guys. Sort of whole season. Do you guys have any questions for me? Anything you'd like better defined?
I mean, I want to know more about all the monsters, all of our personal monsters, because I thought those designs were very cool.
100%.
I had a lot of fun working on the visuals for these monsters. I wish I had better artistic skills so I could draw them, but I loved working on these monsters.
And I feel that all the time.
Roman's came to me immediately, and Laura's came almost as quickly afterwards. It took a little bit more to pull Chad's monster out, but I think it was a good one. I think I got there.
Yeah, it was very good. I liked it a lot. Yeah, Chad was, for me, I'm gonna pivot back for a second. I'm sorry. Chad was such an interesting character for me playing Chad, because there was this really weird balance that had to be struck between, you're a terrible person, but why would anyone inside the circle ever think you're a terrible person? And I think the monster being what it was great, because it goes back to that like focal point. That is the crux of what made him the monster that he is. Even though it's not something we delved into play, even though it's not something that necessarily even the other two would have known, I think it's great that it was really that his father and the demand and the expectation and the greed that all
degradation, and the humiliation, and the
just
undefinable, unattainable expectations.
Yeah, just so perfectly came together to make Chad who he was, and I thought it was great that was what the monster represented.
Yeah, they were each designed to take advantage of your particular haunts. Roman, the Broken Heart army was always designed to provide a temptation. Should tempt him, Roman, away from his companions, is what I have here in various ways, or to an extent tempt each of you guys away from each other, or to tempt them into a dangerous battle or environment without them being properly prepared. The Broken Heart Army was initially, in my sort of first pass of this, going to be the real main combat focused conflict monster. Had a lot of fun putting together that one. The Thousand Scheming Hands, I actually had the sabotage idea for before I actually solidified what the monster was. I always knew it was just going to be Laura's hand from about here up, and that's just it. I don't think we ever, I mean, you guys never got a
No.
full description of the Thousand Scheming Hands.
It's the one with all the hair. You're thinking of Thing.
Well, the Thousand Scheming Hands was about from here up, but it did have the
like
blonde
Thing.
hair. Yeah, like was it Thing? It was Thing.
Yeah, Thing is the hands.
Yeah.
It is their cousin
Right. Yep.
who has the hair.
Yep. Yeah, that was the whole intent of the Thousand Scheming Hands was to make Laura question the cast's motive and their determination to go on, and if
already
they were
questioned
useful.
that.
Yeah, you already questioned that. It was more not necessarily making you question that, but making you answer, no, they're not worth it. They're a liability. Let's
No.
use them, toss them.
The boys are a liability.
Yep. And they were. And we've already talked a little bit about the Gluttonous Gatekeeper, which did come a little bit after. Designed in part to tempt Chad away from his virtue of community, but not in a temptation sort of way. There was never going to be that let's work together sort of situation. It was always going to be in that very malicious, I am going to belittle and degrade and manipulate into into you turning on each other sort of situation, which is just mean. I had to resign myself that I was going to be an absolute terrible GM and or terrible person through GMing with these monsters.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to, right? Because in the game like this, you have to be worse than we are.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
we were pretty fucking awful.
In I guess the backstory and the mindset of the Gluttonous Gatekeeper, definitely the most malicious entity of the for the 5 monsters that we saw or didn't see in this game. The Gluttonous Gatekeeper was definitely the most outwardly malicious and malevolent and just terrible of all of them.
I don't know if you're right, Lion. I don't think you're right, I don't think.
In what
I
regard?
think you're wrong a little bit. I don't think the GM of Locus has to be worse than the players.
In this specific game.
Yeah, in this specific game, maybe. But I think there's a room for a horror GM to be nicer than the players deserve.
Oh,
Agreed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. No, I meant specifically for Iron Coke and Conscience.
For the 3
Okay,
characters
yeah.
you made. Yeah.
Yes,
If I was a
yeah.
nice, cozy GM
Oh,
for
I'm not
this.
saying cozy. But I'm saying, like, sometimes instead of presenting us with cruelties, you could present us with puppies to kick. And I
Yes.
think that would
Yeah.
have also presented a horror story about bastards in an interesting light. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I appreciate Jack's tack in being worse than us.
Well, see, I tried to give you a puppy to kick, but you told him to stay home
tried.
with his father.
That's
I chose,
true.
Yes, but the moment that I chose not to kick the puppy,
Yep, that
was
one
an
moment of
important
weakness.
character
Yep.
point. And yeah, I did berate myself for it later. He placed a puppy in front of me. I left the puppy unkicked, and that haunted me to the end of my
Yep.
days.
Maybe if you kicked the puppy, we would have gotten out of there. 1 episode, one and done. This is all Laura's fault. Great. We got
Laura's
it.
still getting out. You think she's giving up? She's absolutely not giving up. She's going right the fuck back in there.
Yeah.
At some point.
All right.
Like,
Laura versus the Crucible Dragon.
she'll do
Love
it.
it. Do it.
She's 100% dying in there rather than just like living in Jolston.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Like,
yeah.
that's not an option. Giving up is not an option for Laura. It never is.
Mm-hmm. But I really do like that the ending, the finale, ended with you guys being each other's big bads and having to deal with each other like that. I think it was a much more interesting ending than just having a brawl fest with the Crucible Dragon, or more likely having to try to run and escape from the Crucible Dragon, because the Crucible Dragon was, I mean, a devastatingly dangerous monster. Incredibly high stats, almost the entire Death's Door tracker. I got the infliction of his soot breath off on Laura, and then he just kind of hung back because he didn't need to do anything. But that would have been an incredibly dangerous fight, and not one ever intended for you guys to straight up defeat. In my sort of, before the series got too far, from my own preparation standpoint, usually when I'm creating an idea for a new show, I almost always have the final scene in my mind before I have anything else, or a potential final scene in my mind. And for this one, it was the Crucible Dragon bursting up out from underneath the blast furnace and chasing you guys through Jolston until you got the safe out beyond the border of the steelworks. But that would require, one, you guys working together enough to not kill each other, and two, not destroying all of the evidence. But I adored how this season went. All right. Do you guys have any other questions for me? Anything from chat as well?
So we've touched on this a little bit, but I do have one. So from episode 1, how far off the rails did things get from what you expected based on what you knew of the character concepts we were coming in with and our interpersonal relationships and the ideas you already had for how to point us towards each other?
So, full transparency, I don't remember too much about the first 2 episodes, because
Fair.
I was not in a great place at the time.
So fair. And it's been a while.
Yeah. No, I mean, even more than the passage of time, I was woefully unprepared in every possible way for those first 2 episodes. I mean, I think I had decent notes, but I was not in the best headspace to get it done. And episode 2 definitely got away from me. I think episode 1 went brilliantly. I thought that was great. I don't really try to even plan player trajectory anymore. That's a fool's gambit in my mind. So
Sure.
I basically like to define areas and define NPCs. In fact, for this game in particular, and I try to use it for a lot of my games, but for this game in particular, I like how the Alien RPG actually sets up its modules, because it gives you a map, it gives you a list of all the important characters and a little dossier on them, and it gives you a description of each of the different places on the map, and then it's this little like half-page blurb about what you need to get done, and you just go. Yeah, here's the arena, here's the people in it, you guys decide where you're going to go. When you interact with something, here's how it's going to work. I've never been a fan of the way either of those Ds make their supplements, their modules, where it's, you know, step by step by step. Here they go to the tavern, and then they have to talk to this merchant, and then that merchant betrays them, and then they send them over here, and they get jumped, and yada yada yada, because the players never go that route.
Yeah, I was gonna say a funny quick sideline comment. So for years, I ran the official like modules in a comic shop for D&D. like weekly for I think it was 3 years or 4 years or something. And I can tell you that for that entire time and any other time that I've run modules for people outside of the store setting, I have never once had a situation where everything just went front cover to back cover,
Right.
exactly how they said it was gonna go, and you never had to like improv or add anything else. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%, and that's totally fair. To clarify, I meant less from the like pre-planned like plot that you had for us, and more your expectations versus how we went down the road.
Well, I was always I don't think I really had any expectations.
Okay.
I figured it was going to be a case of extremes. Either everybody would come away from this a solidified core group, you would have your discussions, you would have your blowouts, you would have your fights, and then you would hug it out, and you would understand each other, you would know each other, you would help each other grow as individuals and as a group, you would overcome the problem, solve the issue, make it out, this tight group best of friends, the horror is solved. That's not what happened at all. Or exactly what did happen would happen, where you guys would just ferociously attack each other by the end. I figured it would be one of those two. And I am much more entertained that it was the latter.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have to feel like we knew coming into it the story we were going to tell in that regard.
You guys really went out of your way to make not just terrible people, but terrible people that were terrible to each other, especially the boys.
Yeah.
So the former of those two situations would have taken way more work and a way more vulnerability to actually get to that point. And I figured that by like half an hour into the third episode, I knew it was going to be the way it was going forward. I think there was hope in the first two episodes, largely because I was still trying to define exactly where I was going and where you guys were going, because that was not aligned, especially in the second episode. Things were pretty much as intended in the first episode, but the second episode, the first thing in my notes was they go talk to Sheriff. You guys didn't go find Sheriff until like half an hour before the end of the section. And the fact that you guys didn't do that, and with my state at the time, when you didn't do that, my brain just went blank, and I'm like, oh no, I am not prepared for this. You guys just wandered into the steel without any idea what you were looking for or what you were doing, and just started poking around places. So I had to, on the fly, think up places to poke around. So that rail yard, that intake processing center you guys poked around at, even the Coke Works to some extent was entirely improv.
Love it. That was great. That was awesome.
Because you guys were awesome with the nonsense I came up with.
Well, you gave us a good framework to work with. It's a team effort.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jack, I just want to say right there, because I feel like it's been on my mind this entire time, but it feels especially relevant in this moment. The research that you did in preparation for that, like, really allowed you to do that seamlessly. As someone who has been to Bethlehem Steel Mill several times, like, I could hear all of those elements woven in, and the fact that you understood what the setting was, I think, allowed you to do that improv brilliantly.
I'm glad it played out that way. I've never actually been to Bethlehem Steel or Pittsburgh. I found the research very interesting, very entertaining. I watched like 3 hours worth of documentaries on one on Pittsburgh Steel and its operation, and one on the history and downfall of Bethlehem Steel and the entire steel industry. I have like 4 pages of notes. It was like I was taking a college course again. I have a whole layout of I believe I used the I believe it was the Bethlehem steel plant I used as the map I used. But I do have notes on the entire process from iron and coal to coke and slag and moving that through the coke ovens and the blast furnace and the basic oxygen furnace, going through the molds, down into the rolling mills, through the continuous casting plant, the scarfing process afterwards. I know way more than I will ever need to about how to make steel for this one little 6-week show.
But it's a great example, and I think this is super important, especially for everything you do here on RPGs Uncovered. It's so important to remember that remembering all your story beats is cool, but what will always serve you better is knowing your setting, knowing where you are. Because like JD said, it was seamless. I had no idea that you were just winging that. I had no clue whatsoever. Because you were aware enough of what was going on that when we inevitably stepped outside of what you had expected us to do, you were able to go, okay, cool. I know these things. I can just do this. It was great.
Yeah, that's always how I've been as a world builder. I will say I am much more of a world builder than a storyteller. At least in my own distinction, and if you have a solid foundation of your world, it is so much easier to make things up than it is if you don't have an understanding of the world and you're just relying on those story beats. Because if then those don't happen, it's hard to readjust and find new ways to make that work. So I always really try to have a good foundation to build on. But it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. GMing is a lot of work, but it's work that I enjoy. It's work that I really enjoy. And I will say I do definitely put even a lot more work into these actual play shows than I necessarily would for just goofing around at a home game. So that is by no means necessary to be a GM, but it is always a nice little tip and good practice.
You have the time and the spoons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just keep
that the
polishing
way.
that one spoon.
Yep.
Yep. Just every now and then bend it back into place.
Yep.
All right. Well, I don't see anything new from chat. I think that covers pretty much everything I have to say on my behind the scenes stuff. I'm sure there's more. I'm going to go through all my notes and make sure they are all uploaded to the Patreon. Not Patreon, Ko-Fi. I use that now because it's just a better platform. Sorry, Patreon. Oh, yeah.
Don't be sorry, Patreon, get your shit together.
Yeah, really. But the sheriff. The Sheriff Colm Kilkenny. I spent way too much time trying to map out the demographics of Jolston. giving all of these little NPCs that I knew you would never interact with, giving them names. And so throughout all of that research I did, I learned that there were a lot of Irish immigrants that worked in the steel. It was mostly, at least from what I saw from, I think that was from Pittsburgh Steel, not necessarily Bethlehem, but I think it worked out through the entire steel industry. It was a lot of Irish and Hungarians, I believe, were the two big ethnicities in steelworks. So we have Sheriff Colm Kilkenny and his family. I don't know if I gave the wife a name, strangely enough, but the kids Samuel and Olivia. And Mason and Ethel Raz. Mason Raz being the old man.
Fuck
Which
that old man.
you guys immediately hated.
I was waiting for it.
I had to do it.
What
It's
if
the
we
last time I'm gonna get to do it.
Yep.
What if we got a chance and we did shoot to him instead of each other? What
That
if we
would have been
combined
nice.
our forces to shoot the man?
You're still
That's
there.
how
You
we
could
would
shoot
have
the
worked
man.
Together. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually how we would have resolved this. We would have gotten the gun from the safe.
shot the man, left the town.
Holding hands, skipping on our way out.
La la la.
Yeah, secretly, the Crucible Dragon was not the heart of the Malice Locus. It was that crotchety old man at the border of
I
town.
knew it all along. I mean, come on, Jack.
That's why I tried to get the boys never to interact with the man.
There you go.
And they did not listen to me.
I think the only other thing I would point out, not really a secret, but an inspiration. I probably mentioned it a number of times before. One of the main influences of Iron Coke and Conscience was the Billy Joel song "Allentown," which is a beautiful song about the growing problems of ultra capitalism and the downfall of the steel industry and unions and all of that stuff. Billy Joel's Allentown, fantastic song in so many ways.
Absolutely wonderful.
Allentown, not Leningrad. That's why no clowns showed up.
I'm not
Now I
familiar
get
with that
it.
one, but no clowns in
Leningrad
Jolston.
Leningrad is my favorite topical Billy Joel feels song about the end of the Cold War.
I mean, Billy Joel just has so much good
He has
music.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
So much.
I'm a big fan of the late 70s, early 80s balladeers because I'm an ace person and I got super tired of love songs. So I like that genre. I listen to a lot of metal, like anything that's not 90% love songs by volume. Bluegrass, shit, I love bluegrass.
I can't do bluegrass. I've tried.
Bluegrass is the metal of country.
That's fair. That's fair.
I never thought of it that way, but
that's. I don't know if that makes it better, but that's true.
yeah.
Usually requires a higher degree of technical proficiency than you would expect from listening to it.
That's true.
Most of the songs are about intense human emotions and human history and misery and suffering.
Speaking of human history and Billy Joel, while we're on the topic, because you can't talk about Billy Joel's music and not bring it up at least once. I don't know if everyone knows, but Fall Out Boy just did a updated "We Didn't Start the Fire."
Oh, did they start it this time?
Well, no, of course not. But we'll never know who started it. It's fine.
Spoilers. It wasn't Fall Out Boy or
good.
Billy Joel. Shit.
No, we'll never know. We'll never know.
Those were my entire list of suspects, was Fall Out Boy and Billy Joel. Now it's back to square one.
Yep.
Shit.
It's just Ryan in the microwave.
Yeah.
So I think for signing off, because I think that covers pretty much everything we have to say about both Locus as a game. I hope you have a good understanding of the game now and whether it's the right fit for you and your table. And all we have to say for our Iron, Coke, and Conscience afterplay. Let's end with just one more good wrap-up question. And you know what? There's a lot of good questions here, but as our final wrap-up question, what moment from a particular character stands out the most to each of you? What was the best moment that you think another character had in this entire story?
That's not fair. There's so many.
There's a lot to choose from.
So many to choose from. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna purposefully wait and be one of the last people to answer this because I want I'm calling it dibs. I want other people to take options away from me.
Go hell!
No,
Get
I
the
have
heck!
I have said plenty. I am taking this opportunity to sit back and say nothing.
I don't believe you!
I've turned them against each other again.
Okay, dibs out. JD first.
Right under the bus. Damn.
If that's
You
how
know
this
what?
game
That's
is gonna
fair.
play, I'm not gonna lose.
How very Laura.
I'm not losing.
Yeah, technically, Roman won, so it's only fair that you get to go first. Yeah.
You know, that is fair. Okay, I mean, it's hard because, as everyone's saying, there's so many good ones to choose from. I think the one that stands out to me for Laura the most is the decision not to kick the puppy. Like, that was such an that entire conversation with him was so interesting to me, but Laura weighing the pros and cons gave us a moment that I don't know if any of the, shall we say, more impulsive moments that came later did, because we really saw the fact that Laura is capable of scheming and is capable of recognizing when something is not in her best interest, even if it is incredibly tempting. And that spoke so much to her character and her haunt. I mean, that she was able to be direct and find that way towards sabotage. And so I really loved it because it did contrast, like, in the finale when you needed to act quickly. So that was beautiful.
Yeah. She can do think.
Yeah, no, it was.
Doesn't
I loved that so
like
much.
to.
And I think, I mean, it's hard because we've talked about it a lot, but for Chad, the moment that really stands out to me is when he, not just when he decided to drug the water, but the moment he decided to give the bottle to Roman. Like, it was always going to happen. But again, there was something in that purposefulness. I also will never get the finale out of my head, like the way you described the condition of Chad's body and just that final
fully
moment.
Anakin Skywalker.
I mean, like, that as well was impeccable, in the fact that he held the gun there before Roman pulled the trigger. Like, those images are going to haunt me. So kudos for all of that as well.
Good job. I really liked when Chad just fucking went off on Roman in the finale. And you're like, oh, all this shit has been there the entire time. This is how you viewed your friendship literally from day one. And now we're hearing it because he just desperately wants to hurt Roman. And, like, I liked that. I thought it was very... it was very much like a floodgate bursting. In a way that I liked.
I still have to go back and actually watch that scene, because it was one of those times where I just was in Chad brain.
Yep.
Oh, that's happened to me. That's happened to me as a GM.
Yeah, I can't perceive that scene outside of Chad doing it. I have to go back and watch that, actually, to see how it came off.
Some stuff happens in the season 2 finale of Sword of Symphonies, and I couldn't tell you what it is.
Oh, yep. I love those moments. They're so good.
I could not tell you what it is, let's see. I liked when Roman did crime. I liked when he went out to burn the town down because Carr was roasted. I was like, oh, he's this bitch. This is the bitch that he is.
That was such a good one.
It's like, oh, genuinely, Roman is catastrophically petty. like monstrously and catastrophically petty. Yeah, and I thought that was just that was very revealing of exactly how low the bar for like things you need to do for Roman to consider you destroy worthy. And I liked that, even though like I don't think the characters were in the same position as the car. Like, I think Chad much exceeded the car in terms of crimes, but that showed how low the bar was, and I liked that a lot.
It was a nice car. It was a real nice car.
It's a really nice
Very
car.
expensive car.
I know. I didn't keep those 12 times you argued about the feet on the dash, according to my notebook.
A 97 Porsche 911, man.
I just wanted to bring it up again, and I'm glad I got to bring it up again in the finale.
But you do remind me of another fun tidbit I wanted to point out in the after show. Every time a character made some sort of remark about how they wanted to burn something, a fire would start.
I love that so much.
That was the Malice Locus. You want fire? Here you go. I've done it already. You want to do it too?
Awesome.
Done. Unfortunately,
dang.
Laura had that intrusive thought while she was knee-deep in explosive material.
Oopsie. Oopsie.
But that's what that was all about. It came
That
up
was awesome.
a
I love
number of
that.
times,
That's
and
so
I
cool.
don't think you guys put it together.
I definitely didn't.
No, I definitely didn't, so I'm glad you shared that.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you. That's so cool.
I kind of figured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figured once I exploded you immediately after you said you were going to burn this place down. I figured I was being a little overt there.
No, because you were about to say something and then you paused and you said, I wish you hadn't said that. And then you did
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Oh
And I was
yeah.
like, oh, I see.
Yep.
Oh, I see, Jack.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's great. I missed that in the moment. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I had that planned.
caught
I mean, it
it.
came up a number of times in the first 2-3 episodes. So that was
we
already
were real in on burning this place.
yeah. But so that was already established in my mind, and then you guys stopped with that sentiment for a while, and then you brought it up again in the worst possible place. I'm like, oh no, I have to do it now.
Yeah,
How do I
we
not
committed.
kill Laura just immediately? And I love that scene. I love that scene for reasons that
was
you guys
so
did
good.
not know about, but I love that scene.
That makes it so much better. Okay, so for me, so there are so many. Okay, so with Laura, I think one of the ones that really stands out to me is similar to the puppy kicking, was refusing to let the kid come and taking the time to, and I think I spoke about this in one of the post-show talks too, where it was very clearly presented as, well, this will cause more problems for me if I do this later, so I'm not gonna do it. And then we get to the point where it's like, I should have fucking done it, and it becomes clear that no, it wasn't about the problems. You had an empathic moment, and I really liked the struggle within Laura when dealing with that and the frustration that came with it, because it's so easy with characters like these to just make them caricatures, right? And like it was such a good, I think we all, and I try not to do this often, or I never do this, but I will pat even myself on the back here. I think we all did a great job with this, of finding that perfect place between over-exaggerated, terrible people who we want you to know are, you know, bad people, and keeping it within the realm of like, this is still realistically what these people will act like. And I think it was such a great telling moment for Laura of that, like, ah, shit, I fucked up once and here the fuck we are and we didn't have to be here. And I loved how it seemed like it kept eating away at her moving forward, right? Like it didn't stop right away.
You felt
And I
guilty for making the right choice
exactly,
from a
and
moral perspective.
I loved that. I thought it was such a great piece of character work. So that is probably one of, I can't say absolute favorite, but one of my favorite Laura things. Oh, Roman. With Roman, I think the one that I'm gonna call out here is that moment when drugged down into the deepest pits of the Malice Locus, Roman comes to the conclusion that he's destined to be here.
Yeah.
I loved that because it came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
For anyone on the outside, it just was a, what the fuck did he just say? You need to be sober, hydrate, and sit for a couple of minutes. But it was so, and it was a pivotal moment for Roman, right? It was that pivotal moment of, this is my destiny. Of course I have a destiny. Why wouldn't I? And well, I guess you were here too. And it was so good to watch as it kind of became this all-encompassing thing, right? Because it from that moment on, I mean, even the couple of moments leading up to that statement, were Roman realizing, this is why I'm here, this is what I have to do for myself, for the family, because that's how this works. and I will get what I deserve because I am this heroic, destined hero, and I'm here to claim it. And I loved that. It was so good. And JD, you were so good about the delivery because it's such an easy thing to overdo, but it was that perfect, like, quiet, calm, resolved, I understand now. And it was like, what? Nothing, don't worry about it. And it was so good. It was such a perfect, both of those are just examples of just these characters, I feel like, at their core. And it was so cool. Those were some of my favorite moments. Yeah, loved it. Also, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and call out Jack as well, because Jack, you absolutely crushed this game. So many amazing. There are so many amazing moments. I'm hijacking this stream for 1 minute. Favorite.
That's all the time we have for tonight, folks. I'll see you.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a glare later, I'm sure. But yeah, there were so many amazing moments that you put in front of us, Jack, and that you put together, and you did such a great job of letting things breathe when they needed to breathe, which is something that I think, and no shade to anyone, but I think a lot of people struggle with that. Wanting to move things forward, wanting to keep narrative driven, wanting to keep presenting more opportunities, and I think you do an amazing job of, especially in this series, but every time I've seen or had the pleasure of being at your table, of knowing when to just kind of sit back. You've given us everything we need to have, and just letting us have the moment and let it exist. And I think one of the many examples of that from this game was how you did the narration for Roman's shooting Chad. I think that was absolutely, exactly, perfectly what needed to happen. And I can't imagine it having been presented or painted in a better way. And the fact that you kind of let it linger for a moment too was immaculate.
Well, thank you. That does mean a lot to me. No, I from a GM standpoint, especially when I'm running a game and when I'm presenting a show, when I'm running a show, I do approach it in a very sort of cinematic director seat kind of way. So I'm glad it worked out. I've always been a fan. I have so many different, mostly sci-fi DVD box sets, and the best thing about DVD box sets are the special features that nobody but me watches. I love watching the director's cuts and all the behind the scenes commentaries and the actor interviews. My favorites are always the director interviews and the director commentary reels. I love that stuff. So
I'm just gonna throw this out there too while we're doing this. You are legitimately the reason why I've started implementing cinematic moments in my games. That is a thing that I saw you do and went, that's so fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone, I can vibe with you on also being one of the nerds who loves watching those behind the scenes and hearing from the directors and hearing from. I love it so much, and it's so cool. You do such an amazing job with that.
No, and I'm gonna quickly echo that because there are so many moments from this game that are going to be etched in my mind because of how vividly you painted that picture.
Get his ass!
The smokestack burning at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The last moment with Roman, with the gun over the mantle, telling stories about Chad. Like, that is going to haunt me to the end of my days, and it was something you incorporated so beautifully throughout.
Get him.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm glad it worked out and that it was enjoyable. Yeah, no, I am doing what I love to do here. I wish I was making more money doing it, but I'm doing what I love to do here.
Fair.
Hopefully I can
Getting on the
continue
way.
doing this and doing even more in the future. Always wanted to get into theater and acting and directing and that sort of stuff, but so I do this.
And you crush it.
Yeah, you do. And isn't that a mood too?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I don't know how to follow any of that up. So I think
Bye.
yeah, I think that's what we got. I think from here I think that's the end of season 5. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's been a great time. It's been a fantastic season. It was a ride, a rough ride sometimes, such a fun, exciting ride most of the time, especially towards the end there. I had a lot of fun. One final time, thank you guys so much for being just an amazing cast. I could not have imagined doing this with anybody else, this particular story, these particular characters. You guys gave so much of yourselves to your characters, to each other, to me, to the show, to the audience. So thank you so much for that. And thank you guys in the audience for sticking around and watching. And that includes all of you guys over on YouTube watching this in the future. It's always nice to
Hi,
have
Future.
people. Yes, hello, future. It's always nice to have people over watching live in Twitch. It makes Twitch think we're more important than we are, and it's always nice chatting to people in the comments, in the chat. But I watch most of my stuff, most of my actual plays and whatnot on YouTube after the fact. So, hello, future. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being an RPGs Uncovered fan. Hopefully, you'll be seeing a lot more of everybody here. So, I think we finally got to ring out season 5, and hopefully that'll open the doors for season 6 coming soon. So, stay tuned for some of that. I don't want to announce anything yet because I'm still really confused on the state of season 6 right now, but I believe we're moving forward. I'm really excited for it. So do keep an eye out on my Twitter. At RPGs Uncovered, very easy to find, and come hang out with us on Discord. I'm there. I like to say hello and chat. All these wonderful people are there. Everyone from previous seasons are there, and we have so many fantastic indie TTRPG creators and developers and publishers and artists and system mechanics and analysis and playtesters and all kinds of great people there. Relatively quiet chat, but it's nice just having a quiet, relaxing place to hang out and nerd out with people. So come hang out with RPGs Uncovered on the Discord, and that's another good place to just keep up with announcements for casting calls and one shots and cool new events coming up. I'm hoping to do a lot more. With that, I think one more plug for our Ko-Fi. If you've enjoyed this after show, go check out Ko-Fi. That's the best way to support this channel as a whole. I'm working towards a really cool animated intro. I have it all laid out in my mind. I've talked to a number of artists, so I'm really excited to get that worked out. And even more than that, anything I make on for this channel, through the general Ko-Fi supporter funds, the specific donations for the intro is a separate thing, but regular Ko-Fi donations or renewing subscriptions, that goes right back into my fund to pay for these games, pay for Kickstarters, as you see I cover on Whip Workshop, and pay for picking up copies, because I mostly rely on community copies as it is right now. So being able to pay creators for the games that they let me present on this show, pay artists to get video and artwork done, and of course the mayhem meter to help pay my amazing cast. So a lot of great ways to help support the channel if you enjoy what we do, and you can. But I fully understand everyone's having a tough time out there right now, so just showing up and being enthusiastic about our shows with us is a-okay with me. I think that's enough of me yammering on. Let me pass it back to these three amazing people to, one last time, at least for this season, tell you all about what they have going on and where you can find them now that, unfortunately, we won't be here at RPGs Uncovered. Let's go in reverse order. JD, what you got for us?
Get him!
Oh, goodness. Okay. So I am JD. I have been Roman Hargreaves. You can find me on social media, JD, not Jason Dean. I am most often found with Live from the Apocalypse, where I am in five of the ongoing campaigns. I am currently in Class Reunion, which is our D&D homebrew game. I am in Academy H, which is our Masks Actual Play podcast. I am in Thy Kingdom Come, which is our theocratic dystopian game that uses urban shadows. I am in Cold Iron, which is our Changeling the Lost game set in the USSR after the Nazis invaded Arcadia. And I run Redacted, which is our psychological horror game. I can also be found with Tales from the Table Studios in SCP, A Crumbling Foundation, which Lion runs and Jack plays in. And I cannot announce it quite yet, but follow my social media and I will have another announcement for an ongoing campaign that I will be joining in the next couple of weeks.
All right, excellent. Lion, what are you working on?
That's me. Hi, I'm Lion. I am the creative director and founder for Tales from the Table Studios. You can find us here on Twitch. You can also find us on YouTube and on Twitter at TFTT Studios. I got it. It's fine. It happens sometimes. TFTT Studios because Tales from the Table Studios is just too long for Twitter, although it's starting to seem like everything's too long for Twitter. So there's that. You can also find me on Twitter at TheLionKnight42. Right now, I am the storyteller, the overseer, the tail slinger, whatever you would like to call it, for Crumbling Foundation, our SCP actual play, which I am lucky enough to have JD and Jack both at my table for that on Mondays. Besides that, every other Thursday, you can find me Tales from the Table Studios as Abellus Volturn, the high elf of two minds, warlock, sorcerer, something weird going on there. Pathfinder game that we run called Rega. We're currently in season 3, the Banquet of Excess. We just started. It's been pretty interesting so far. We're gonna have a lot of political intrigue coming up, and I am going to shine. You can find me in chat for pretty much every other game that we run on Tales from the Table Studios, because I also run most of our production stuff, which is fun. And similarly, you should keep an eye on our stuff, because in the next couple of weeks, we're also going to be announcing some really, really exciting new stuff that I cannot wait to share with y'all. And maybe even more announcements than we had initially planned after the last couple days. We'll just have to wait and see. So that's it for me, except I'm going to say it one more time as long as everyone's cool with it. I assume everyone is. But, like, you know, fuck the Supreme Court.
Get them! Get their asses!
Before we verge on anything problematic as far as terms of service, Cat.
Get them!
What do you got for us, Cat?
I don't have the same Supreme Court you all do, but I don't like yours very much.
Valid.
I'm not a fan of mine, but I hate yours a lot. I'm the host king of the podcast, Sort of Symphonies, where my good cool friends playtest my game Heroic Chord, and the choir master of Roar to Heaven, in which different friends play a different game and are punished for it. I design games at peachgardengames.com. You can also find my podcasts there. My game was on season 2 of RPGs Uncovered before it was called that. And I like to write games. I do it all the time. That's a big upcoming thing. There's probably a game happening soon, whatever. I think I'm writing one about being a heron. I just did watercolor paint it. But what is coming up is on Plus One EXP, I am going to be hosting a talk show on alternate Fridays starting this upcoming Friday, the 6th. It is called Take Flight, and it is about new designers sitting down with experienced mentors to ask questions and help their dreams take flight.
Excellent.
I am the flight attendant.
I cannot wait to see that, because that is right up my alley.
I'm so
I'm
excited.
so hyped for that.
Yes,
You
I am.
Lion, you have to on Thursday. You have to.
Yes, 100%.
We're gonna talk so much about Pibates. You have to.
Oh, I will be. Wait, what's the time? What time are y'all on?
6 p.m. meow meow time.
I should be able to make at least the first half of it, because then we're going to be live later. But yes.
It's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. meow meow.
Gotcha.
Mountain. Mountain time.
Thank you for the cat translation.
Important.
Yes.
I usually just refer to it as cat time. It's the time I'm in. What
Yeah.
else matters?
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Exactly. All right. Yes, I've dropped the all the links for these fantastic people in the chat for anyone following along, and
Get him.
thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you three so much for being amazing cast members. It's always such a pleasure to work with you guys, and this has been a great season of RPGs Uncovered. So I guess this is signing off the last episode of our Locus feature. So, as always, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, keep having fun, and keep checking back here at RPGs Uncovered, where I'm trying to find you your next favorite game for your table. And when you wrap up a project of your own and it's been a great time, go hang out with your friends and sit down with a big banquet of heart tomatoes. Happy time zone, folks.
Bye, Z's.